Simi, go on.
Good morning. Namaste, everyone. My name is Simi Mehta. I am the CEO and Editorial Director of IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute. And today, I welcome you all to this 3-day online training program on gender equality, climate change and sustainable development goals, which is being jointly organized by National Institute of Disaster Management, NIDM, at the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, and the Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute. So I hope all of you are well and welcome to the day 3 of this web policy learning. And I'm delighted to see you all today. And I hope that you gained a lot from yesterday's lectures by all our experts so much as we did. Like the past 2 days, we have another set of experts who specialize on specific dimensions of gender equality, climate change, and sustainable development goals. So gear up, roll up your sleeves and relax, and feel free to direct your precise questions to the speaker. Remember, on the question and answers box only and not on the chat box. So without any further ado, let me introduce to you our first speaker, Dr. Sanjay Singh. Dr. Sanjay Singh is the waterman of Bundelkhand. He holds a doctorate degree in sociology. He has been active in the much dreaded Chambal region for close to 30 years, during which he has taken up a number of issues that were closely associated with the living conditions of the people in this arid, remote and backward areas, as some of you might know. Dr. Singh has seen the plight of the people of the region, comprising of Jalaun, Jhansi, Mahoba, Banda, and several others, and even a few districts in the neighboring Madhya Pradesh. In an area where rains are scanty with a few rivers, rain has been a precious resource in the area, and Dr. Singh fully realized it right in the beginning of his 3-decade career. Keeping that in mind, Dr. Singh has formed the Jal Saheli or the Water Friends, which are women's groups in the villages in the Bundelkhand region in Uttar Pradesh. Currently, he is the secretary of the Parmarth Samaj Sevi Sansthan, which is a non-governmental, not-for-profit civil society organization which works for the weaker and deprived sections of the society, active in over 600 villages of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. Dr. Singh remains committed to the promotion of local resource-based livelihood opportunities for poor people and collaborates and liaises with the government and activation of local governance. So we are so grateful, sir, you could join us this morning, and I would now invite you to make your presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Simi. Good morning, all of you, all the panelists and participants. This is the good opportunity for the experience to take about the last 20 years in India. My course is the water and climate. So I'm starting in 25 years, 1995. So in some other issues, but my very issue of my heart is very close is water. We will be presenting in the climate and water in this patients.
Sanjay sir, if you can hear me, your voice is breaking.
It will get stable, don't worry. Sanjay, okay. Please go on.
Yeah.
And Sanjay, please speak slowly, I would say. थोड़ा धीरे बोलेंगे तो कनेक्शन का एरर भी ठीक हो जाएगा.
Okay. So साथियों नमस्कार. मैं पिछले 25 साल से I am working in last 25 years in this region, especially in Bundelkhand and Chambal, and also I am in the national convener of Jal Jan Jodo Abhiyan. So because of this responsibility, I am in moving in entire country. So we have been established the good civil society network called in Jal Jan Jodo in 22 states in India. So basically, we are presenting in some good practices about the climate change and water. So request please run through my presentation. May I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So basically, this is the organizations in Parmarth in basically indirectly intervention in Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, but through Jaljan Jodo is intervention in Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Rajasthan, Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Uttarakhand. So basically, the two type of direct and indirect interventions of my organizations. Next. So basically the theory of the change. मुझे लगता है कि प्लीज पिछली स्लाइड ही दिखाएंगे आगे. हाँ एग्जैक्टली मैं समझता हूँ कि कुछ बुनियादी तौर पर कुछ फंडामेंटल एक समाज विज्ञानी होने के नाते जो अभी तक हम कर पाए हैं उसमें से जो हमारे काम का हिस्सा रहा है और उस काम के हिस्से की वजह जो परिस्थितियां रही हैं उन परिस्थितियों के वजह से हम जहाँ तक समझते हैं कि हमने जो काम किए हैं उन कामों में एक तरह से हम कह सकते हैं कि कुछ हम एक ऐसे मॉडल बना पाए हैं कि जो बहुत ही टिकाऊ हैं और जो परिवर्तन के घोतक हैं, बहुत ही सशक्त मॉडल हैं जिन मॉडलों को हमने चलाने की कोशिश करी है. तो यहाँ पे हम बताना चाहेंगे कि मार्जिनलाइज कम्युनिटी को जो खास तौर से सीमांत वर्ग है और उनको हमने उनके स्किल डेवलपमेंट, नॉलेज एनहेंसिंग एंड खास तौर से उनको बहुत सारे तरह
Sanjay sir, can you hear?
से अगर हम कहें कि उनकी कैपेसिटी एक तरह से जिनको हम कह सकते हैं कि दिस इज अपॉर्चुनिटी ऑफ द चेंज ऑफ नॉर्मल, तो ये एक तरह से हमारा जो सिद्धांत है, दिस इज द थ्योरी ऑफ द फैसिलिटेटेड एंड एम्पावरिंग. या नेक्स्ट आप लोगों को तक नहीं मिल पा रही है, रहा है मैं आप सबों को सिमी आप सॉरी हाँ, तो ये हमारे काम के इज द की इंटरवेंशन एरिया, कुछ हमारे काम के कुछ प्रमुख इंटरवेंशन एरिया हैं जैसा हमने कहा कि वाटर रिसोर्स मैनेजमेंट, एग्रीकल्चर एंड लाइवलीहुड, सेफ ड्रिंकिंग वाटर और प्राकृतिक संसाधनों के संवर्धन और खासतौर से महिलाओं के और जेंडर इन एम्पावरमेंट और जेंडर इन डेवलपमेंट. हमारे जो भी काम है उन सब कामों के हिस्से के बीच में एक बड़ा आयाम है वो महिलाओं की भागीदारी नहीं बल्कि एंटाइटलमेंट तक के जो सवाल हैं वो आगे के प्रेजेंटेशन में आपको मिलेगा. और हेल्थ एंड न्यूट्रिशन प्रमोशन, ये सारी चीजें हमने खास तौर से ये प्रमोट किए हैं और ये एक तरह से हमारे काम के जो मुख्य एरिया हैं और जो जिन मुद्दों पे हम काम करते हैं वो ये कुछ प्रमुख मुद्दे हैं. Next, this is the strategies, the organization strengthening in community-based organization. So basically, the Parmarth is a believing that without civil society involvement, and without in community involvements and participatory and without when any participatory approach. वैसे ये सब लोग जानते हैं, सब लोग अपने काम में करते हैं, लेकिन हाँ हमने जो किया है और जो हासिल किया है मैं आपको बताना चाहूँगा कि ड्राउट मिटिगेशन और कम्युनिटी डेवलपमेंट का जो एक सिद्धांत है ये हमने गांव-गांव में जो DRR प्लान बनाए हैं उन DRR प्लान के माध्यम से समुदाय की जो भागीदारी रही है, आज मैं इस प्रेजेंटेशन के माध्यम से कह सकता हूँ कि हमने अपने 25 गाँव के इलाके में लगभग 125 गांव के आसपास के गांव में बुनियादी तौर से परिवर्तन लाने में हम सफल हो पाए हैं, जिनमें ईयर लॉन्ग पूरे वर्ष पर्यंत की जल सुरक्षा से लेके खाद्य सुरक्षा तक में बढ़ोतरी हुई है. और ये बात कभी भी किसी भी एजेंसी के द्वारा कभी भी देखी जा सकती है, नापी जा सकती है, परखी जा सकती है. और क्षमता निर्माण खासतौर से हमारे काम का एक हिस्सा रहा है. ये कुछ मॉडल हैं जिन मॉडलों के ऊपर हम काम करते हैं। ये मॉडल में खासतौर से एक तो जैसे जल संकट बढ़ रहा है उसमें बोरवेल रिचार्ज एक प्रमुख मॉडल है, और इसी तरह से हमारे काम के जो हिस्से हैं उनमें खासतौर से रिवाइवल ऑफ वाटर बॉडीज, हमने चंदेलकालीन तालाबों के रिवाइवल पे बहुत बड़ा काम किया है। उनके ये जिस इलाके में हम काम करते हैं वहाँ चंदेला डायनेसिटी है, उस डायनेसिटी में हमने अब तक 200 के आसपास के तालाबों के रिवाइवल पर काम किया है। पानी पंचायत और जल सहेली का जो कंसेप्ट है, जो पूरे देश का एक इकलौता कंसेप्ट है, इस कंसेप्ट का पायनियर परमार्थ है और उसको और आगे बढ़ाने का काम कर रहे हैं। और क्लाइमेट स्मार्ट एग्रीकल्चर जो आज के वर्तमान की सबसे बड़ी ज़रूरत है, उस काम को हम लोग अपने ज़मीन पे कर रहे हैं। हम यहाँ प्रेजेंटेशन में जो भी बोलेंगे जो हम कर रहे हैं और जिसमें सफलता अर्जित की है, कोई बात सुनी सुनाई या इधर उधर से लिखी पढ़ी बातों पे हम यहाँ पे थ्योरी और सिद्धांत की बात नहीं करेंगे, बल्कि जो हमने किया है वो आप सबके साथ साझा करेंगे। नेक्स्ट, ये हमारे कुछ मॉडल हैं जिनमें हमने बात कहा है कि CBO फॉर्मेशन से स्ट्रेंथनिंग और पोषण सहेली और पोषण पंचायत तक, और वाटर बस्टिंग से वाटर सिक्योरिटी प्लान तक की जो बात कर रहे हैं, और खासतौर से विलेज न्यूट्रिशन सिक्योरिटी की बात कर रहे हैं। और इसके साथ साथ हम की इंटरवेंशन इन सॉइल एंड वाटर कंजर्वेशन स्ट्रक्चर एंड रिजुवनेशन ऑफ द रिजर्वायर ऑफ जो बात कर रहे हैं, ये चंदेला टैंक्स के ऊपर। ये हमारे कुछ फोटोग्राफ्स हैं, लेकिन ये हमारे पूरे काम के एक आयाम को दे गिव इज एक होलिस्टिक सिनारियो अबाउट द length of Parmarth work. So basically this is the photographs providing the idea of the work of Parmarth. This is the length of Parmarth work. Next. So basically the drought reduction and through the water conservation and harvesting. Basically this is the my expertise in, also we have in using in lot of technology about the water conservation. So basically water harvesting structure help to capture the water runoff in organized जो organic material in the soil. So this is the theory. This is a so you are all the aware about this the theory, but हमारे काम का जो हिस्सा है वो बेसिकली हमने क्या किया है कि प्रमोटिंग कंसेप्ट ऑफ मल्टीपल यूज ऑफ वाटर। सो हमने पानी के बहुआयामी उपयोग के ऊपर बढ़ाने की बात करी है। स्ट्रक्चर डिजाइन में खासतौर से लो कॉस्ट स्ट्रक्चर कैसे हो सकते हैं और टिकाऊ स्ट्रक्चर्स कैसे हो सकते हैं, क्लाइमेट फ्रेंडली स्ट्रक्चर्स कैसे बनाए जा सकते हैं, यूजिंग लेस वाटर इंटेंसिव क्रॉप, क्योंकि पानी हम सब जानते हैं कि खेती में द मैक्सिमम use of water in agriculture. So basically how to reduce the uses of water in agriculture. So basically this is the one of the way of promote in less water intensive crop. So basically Parmarth in working in this issues is last 2 decades. So basically this is the my approach. सो यूजिंग ऑफ माइक्रो इरिगेशन सिस्टम की हम बात कर रहे हैं। हम जो तमाम तरह की टपक सिंचाई पद्धति से लेके और जितने भी बातें हैं, और हमने अपने इलाके में रहन पर्सन इन व्हील्स की जो बात करते हैं, जो बिना किसी एनर्जी के चलता है, ये की तरह से एक ज़माने में ये हमारी भारत की बहुत परंपरागत सिंचाई पद्धति थी, उसके रिवाइवल को लेके हम काम कर रहे हैं। और ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग में हम बहुत सारे आयामों को जोड़ने की बात कर रहे हैं, और जीरो टिलिंग और ख़ासतौर से तमाम तरह की जो टेक्नोलॉजी हैं, SWI, SBI, SRI, खासतौर से सिस्टम ऑफ बीट इंस्टिफिकेशन, सिस्टम ऑफ राइस इंस्टिफिकेशन, सिस्टम ऑफ वेजिटेबल इंस्टिफिकेशन. So basically the using this type of technology in development in community nutrition garden. So this is the Parmarth is the basically the pioneer. They Parmarth in last 2 years established in community nutrition garden in Madhya Pradesh. So basically this is the successful model for in long term providing the livelihood and also in nutrition security. So this is the a good Parmarth establishes a good model for the nutrition. This is the replicable water well recharging model. So इस तरह से हमने जो वाटर वेल के रिचार्जिंग के लिए जो अपने इलाके में मॉडल बनाए हैं वो आपको हम दिखा रहे हैं। इन फोटोग्राफ्स के माध्यम से आप समझने की कोशिश करेंगे और ये काफ़ी सफल और सक्सेस मॉडल रहे हैं जिनका हमने उपयोग किया है। नेक्स्ट। सो रिंग एंड पिट मॉडल फॉर बोरवेल रिचार्ज की हम बात कर रहे हैं, जैसा अभी हमने फोटो में दिखाया। सो आप लोगों ने सबने फोटोग्राफ्स में देखा होगा। तो पॉन्ड विच बी कंस्ट्रक्टेड नियर बाय द बोरवेल, ये हम अपने काम जो हम कर रहे हैं उसके चीज़ों के बारे में बताने की बात कर रहे हैं कि एक पॉजिटिव गैदर है, एक रन ऑफ द वाटर फॉर्म जो है। तो ये जो मानसून में जो पानी है उस पानी को हम कलेक्ट करते हैं अराउंड द जो एक्यूअल वाटर वेल की के आसपास जो पानी आता है, जो उसका जल संभरण क्षेत्र है उसके पास जो पानी आता है उसको बाया फिल्टर और बाया तमाम तरह के हम 3 तरह के लेयर से गुजार के उसको पानी को रिचार्ज करने का हमने काम किया है। और आप आश्चर्य करेंगे, हम आप सबको ये बात बताना चाहेंगे कि मध्य प्रदेश के टीकमगढ़ के जतारा मोहनगढ़ तहसील में एक गाँव है नंदनपुर, जिस गाँव में कम से कम 26 से अधिक ट्यूबवेल सूख गए थे और हमारे इस मॉडल से 26 के 26 ट्यूबवेल में पानी आ गया, फिर से रिचार्ज हो गया, और जिनमें बिल्कुल सिंचाई नहीं होती थी, जहां पर अब उनकी जरूरत भर की सिंचाई हो जा रही है। तो ये इतना सक्सेस मॉडल है और हमने उस गांव के आसपास के 3-4 गांव में इस काम को किया है, बाकी भी बुंदेलखंड के और इलाकों में हमने किया है। बॉटम दिस पिट लैंडेड विद द, जो हम बात बता रहे हैं फिल्ट्रेशन मटेरियल की बात कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि गंदा पानी ना जाने पाए। ये बहुत ही हमारी चिंता है कि गंदा पानी किसी भी कीमत जमीन नहीं डालना है। तो इसलिए ये हम अपने काम के साथ करते रहते हैं। और इसके साथ साथ जो हमारे लिए सबसे ज़्यादा जो जरूरी है वो जरूरी है कि हम जो काम कर रहे हैं उस काम में बात कर रहे हैं कि सेकेंड लेयर्स और ये सारी चीज़ें, ये बेसिकली टेक्नोलॉजी है जो बाद में अगर आप लोगों के सवाल होंगे तो बात करेंगे। ड्यूरिंग द रेनिंग सीजन के दौरान की ये बातें हैं और ये एक काम करने का एक सिद्धांत है। सो बेसिकली इस पे हम उपयोग करके, और ये अभी इस तरह के स्ट्रक्चर की जरूरत ना केवल गांव में शहर में भी है, क्योंकि जिस तरह से सोर्स सस्टेनेबिलिटी के लिए हमें काम करने की ज़रूरत है, जिस तरह से पानी घट रहा है, वाटर टेबल जिस तरह से नीचे जा रहा है, उसको बनाए रखने के लिए हमें इस तरह के विधान करने ही होंगे और इन विधानों के आधार पर ही हम कुछ चीज़ें स्थापित कर सकें। नेक्स्ट। तो बेसिकली ये कॉस्ट इफेक्टेड है और ये कॉस्ट इफेक्टिव है, ये कम लागत में होने वाला है। तो बेसिकली लोकली जो हमारा वहाँ का मटेरियल है हम उसका उपयोग कर लेते हैं। बोरवेल रिचार्ज सर्विस और एक्सट्रीमली लो कॉस्ट है और इसकी सस्टेनेबिलिटी काफ़ी है ऑन द रिचार्ज इन बोरवेल। तो ये खास तौर से जो है अंडरग्राउंड वाटर को बढ़ाता है। गांव के लोगों को हमने ट्रेनिंग किया है कि बरसात आने से पहले इसको कैसे साफ कर लें ताकि टिकाऊ। मेरा अभी तक 7 से 8 साल से लोग अपने इसका उपयोग कर रहे हैं और कोई भी तरह की परेशानी नहीं आई है। The community have been working 7 and 8 years in using this type of practices and they are very happy in borewell recharge pit। तो उनके लिए बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है और हमने ना केवल बोरवेल में किया है, सिंचाई के पानी को काम को भी हमने काम करने की कोशिश की है। तो बेसिकली ये एक तरह से ये हमारी टेक्निक ये है जो टेक्निक इज मोर इम्पोर्टेंट एंड मोर यूजफुल और बेसिकली दिस इज द वेरी गुड मॉडल फॉर एन वाटर रिचार्जिंग थ्रू वाटर structure like a well and tube well। So next, key strategy of the activities। तो ये हम mapping of water and bodies in hydrological in groughing of the soil, assessment of the storage and water level reservoir and landscape evaluation की बात कर रहे हैं। participative planning, designing and construction, repair and water inlet, outlet, sewage treatment, ensuring there the acute drinking and drainage areas। तो बेसिकली हमने जैसा आपको बताया था कि हमारे यहाँ 1000 साल पुराने चंद्राइला डायनेसिटी है जो 9वीं से लेके 9th to 12th century। सो बेसिकली दिस ऑल द स्ट्रक्चर एंड वेरी ओल्ड स्ट्रक्चर। तो उनमें तमाम तरह के सीपेज और इन तरह की समस्या हो गई है, उनको ठीक करने का काम उनको उनके स्लूस को ठीक करने का काम, उनके बंड को ठीक करने का काम, उनके आउटलेट इनलेट को ठीक करने का काम। तो ये बंड में सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम सीपेज का है, तो इसको ठीक करने का काम हम लोग कर रहे हैं और जिस पाए हैं। और 200 चंदेलकालीन तालाब, और यूं तो अगर हम कहें कि हमने अपने इस काम के वजह से पिछले 20 साल में 2000 से अधिक वाटर स्ट्रक्चर हमने बनाए हैं, जो विभिन्न तरह के वाटर स्ट्रक्चर हैं, लेकिन इनमें जो काम किया है वो एक काम बड़ा प्रभावशाली रहा है और जिनके रिजल्ट्स बहुत अच्छे रिजल्ट्स। नेक्स्ट। ये कुछ फोटोग्राफ्स हैं जो हम बात कर रहे थे, ये आफ्टर और बिफोर हैं, और आप देख सकते हैं ये सुलूस है पहली फोटो में, जहाँ से जब ये तालाब थे, तालाब पहले के राजाओं ने सिर्फ पानी के संरक्षण के लिए बनाए। जब अंग्रेज आए तो उन्होंने रेवेन्यू जनरेशन करने के लिए इन सबसे नहरें निकलवा दी, तो ये नहर निकाले हुए सुलूस हैं, यहीं से सीपेज होता है, ये सारी चीज़ें हैं। और आज एक तालाब में लोग कैसे श्रमदान और ये सारी चीज़ें कर रहे हैं, और उसके बाद देख रहे हैं आपके पर्याप्त पानी से भरा हुआ लबालब तालाब है, और गांव के लोग अपने हैप्पीनेस ऑफ इंडेक्स आप इस फोटो में देख सकते हैं। ये कुछ अलग अलग ढाल के विपरीत किस तरह के हम स्ट्रक्चर दे सकते हैं, कैसे कैसे स्ट्रक्चर लोग कॉस्ट बना सकते हैं, इस तरह के स्ट्रक्चर्स बनाने का हम लोगों ने बहुत काम किया। नेक्स्ट। हाँ, ये भी कुछ तालाब हैं। अब हम आपसे बात कर रहे हैं कि जल सहेली पे आ जाते हैं। बेसिकली जल सहेली इन पानी पंचायत, आप सबने नाम सुना होगा जल सहेली के। जल सहेली बेसिकली वुमेन वाटर फ्रेंड है, और ये वाटर वॉरियर है, और वॉरियर होने के नाते जल सहेली एक को हम इंट्रोड्यूस करेंगे ड्यूरिंग द इम्प्लीमेंटेशन। ये हमने यूरोपियन यूनियन, बेल्ट हंगर हेल्प जैसी एजेंसियों के सपोर्ट से हम इस काम को सफल हो पाए। ये 2011 में हमने ये मॉडल स्टार्ट किया था, और फर्स्ट पानी पंचायत वाटर इन 2011 में बनाई थी। देखें तो हमारी 100 से अधिक पानी पंचायत हैं। ये नंबर क्योंकि प्रेजेंटेशंस में हम सुधार नहीं कर पाए हैं, ये 1000 नहीं, अब 1500 नहीं, 1000 के आसपास जल सहेलियां हैं, और जो बुंदेलखंड के 6 जिलों में ये काम कर रही हैं, और अपने ये बिना किसी पैसे के, बिना किसी प्रलोभन के, बिना किसी लालच के अपने गांव को पानीदार बनाने का काम कर रही हैं। और इनसे मिलके इतनी खुशी होती कि इन्होंने अपने गांव को किस तरह से पानीदार बनाया। नेक्स्ट। तो बेसिकली ये जो पानी पंचायत का जो प्रिंसिपल है कवर्स का, तो इक्विटी इन डिमांड मैनेजमेंट, राइट to landless community participation, sustainability of the resource, it is the structural जो हम बात कर रहे हैं एक तरह से कंप्रेस्ड है। तो पानी पंचायत एक तरह गांव का एक संगठन है, CSO है, CBO है, और एक CBO है जो गांव को पानीदार बनाने का काम करता है। और उसमें भी वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग इज द वाटर यूजर एसोसिएशन। सो बेसिकली दिस इज ए वाटर यूजर एसोसिएशन, एंड दे प्रोटेक्ट इन वाटर बॉडीज, एंड तो ये डिसीजन मेकिंग इन ऑल द पब्लिक पार्टिसिपेशन, मंथली मीटिंग, एवरीथिंग इज बेसिकली दे bodies is very active working in village level for in water sufficient village. So they are ensuring the equitable water distribution in water intensive crop, compulsory contribution of the community, sustainable plan for the monitoring and maintenance of the water bodies. So they are the some activities of Pani Panchayat. So they are very actively working in the foreign village level water conservation's work. Next. So this is the photographs. So basically in Pani Panchayat, in water bodies, in Parmarth, in the mostly is women. So this is the women lead initiative. So they have in knowledge about the measurement, how to take the measurement, and in Manrega and other work. They have in hand pump repairs, and they also the people public action. So they have in go to an officer, meet to in the grievance redressal mechanism. So this is the activities of the Jal Saheli and Pani Panchayat members. So basically the sum is important for in all the participants and the panelists. So basically the piloting of the horticulture based in community nutrition garden. So basically we are in the previous, we will share about the example of the Shiohpur and Chhatarpur district in Madhya Pradesh, development knowledge project with the community nutrition garden in Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. So basically they Parmarth established in 2 districts, one district in Chambal and one district in Bundelkhand. This is very successful model in 1 hectare land and community lands. They have established in 620 plants, and also they have been using in more vegetable variety, leaves, vegetable and other vegetable for in they have been this type of model in supporting of the reducing the nutrition. Basically this the providing the help for in improvement of the nutrition. So basically कुपोषण को दूर करने में, मालन्यूट्रिशन को दूर करने में ये काफ़ी सहायक है और ये काफ़ी सक्सेस मॉडल रहा है। और इस तरह के पौधे लगाए गए हैं कि जो 25-30 साल तक लोगों को दे सकें, और पंचायत की ज़मीन मनरेगा की कन्वर्जेंस से ये पूरा काम हुआ है। और ये टिकाऊ मॉडल स्थापित करने में हम लोग सरकार ने और मध्य प्रदेश सरकार ने इसको पूरे प्रदेश में इसको लागू कर दिया है। हर पंचायत में एक पोषण वाटिका बनाने की प्रयास शुरू की। नेक्स्ट। सो ये सब उनके फोटोग्राफ्स हैं, आप देख सकते हैं। हमारे जल सहेली, ये उनका ड्रेस कोड है, ये ड्रेस कोड है और इस ड्रेस कोड को वो देख रहे हैं कि किस तरह से अपने वहाँ बैठे हैं, हमें दिखा रहे हैं कि क्या क्या उनके उसमें लगा हुआ है, पौधे लगे हुए हैं। और महिलाओं का जो खुशी का स्तर है वो आप देख सकते हैं कि दे शी इज वेरी हैप्पी अबाउट द इन production of in kitchen garden, community nutrition garden. So this is the photographs. Next. Oh, sorry. Back. So basically the climate smart agriculture. So basic की बात जो मैं कर रहा हूँ, assessment of the physical and biological properties की बात कर रहे हैं, promoting multiple use of water less interventions crop की बात कर रहे हैं, micro irrigation system की बात कर रहे हैं, drainage varieties of promotion की बात कर रहे हैं, reduce zero tillering और system के बारे में पहले ही मैंने बता दिया। Next. So some photographs कि कैसे हम कम पानी के बीजों का प्रबंधन करते हैं, मल्चिंग भी करते हैं और मल्टीपल क्रॉप्स लगाते हैं। एक समय में 7 से 8 तरह की फसलें लेने का काम करते हैं। तो ये जो प्रमोशन ऑफ मिक्स क्रॉप है, इसका भी हम बड़े पैमाने पे काम करते हैं। हमारे यहाँ सीडल से बुवाई नहीं होती, तो हम लोगों ने सीडल की जगह खास तौर से लाइन स्विंग को बहुत बढ़ावा दिया है और उसको बढ़ाने की कोशिश की। नेक्स्ट। ये कुछ फोटोग्राफ्स हैं, खासतौर से आप देख सकते हैं जो लोग अपने यहाँ खासतौर से नाडेप, बर्मी कंपोस्ट और इस तरह से जो चीज़ें कर रहे हैं, इन सारी चीज़ों को जुटाने की वो कोशिश कर रहे हैं। ये एक हमारे लिए बड़ा अवसर है और जिसके आधार पे हम करते हैं। मैं
You got muted?
हाँ, संजय सर म्यूट हो गए हैं। संजय सर म्यूट हो गया आपका, एक बार अनम्यूट कर लें।
Maybe you can try unmuting from your end.
मेरी आवाज आ रही होगी?
जी सर। वर्मी कंपोस्टिंग।
हाँ, तो वर्मी कंपोस्टिंग पे मैं बात कर रहा था। ये एक बहुत ही टिकाऊ व्यवस्था है और बहुत सरल है। खासतौर से वर्मी कंपोस्टिंग है, बीज का उपचार है और कैसे हम खेती में कम लागत की खेती को बढ़ावा दे सकते हैं। और ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग के जो मॉडल हैं, ये इस तरह का हमने बहुत बड़े पैमाने पे हमारा काम है कभी भी। और कई गांव में मैं ये कह सकता हूँ कि कई जगह ऐसी स्थिति हुई है कि ये कहना बहुत थोड़ा सा जल्दबाजी होगी कि 100% लोग खाद को छोड़ चुके हैं, लेकिन हाँ केमिकल फर्टिलाइजर को छोड़ चुके हैं, लेकिन हाँ बहुत अधिक मात्रा में ऐसी परिस्थितियां हुई हैं कि लोग अब केमिकल फर्टिलाइजर की जगह पे लगभग इस तरह के जो खासतौर से बायोवेस्ट चीज़ें हैं उनके ऊपर लोग आ गए हैं और लोग ने काम शुरू कर दिया है और अपने यहाँ पे वो ऑर्गेनिक एग्रीकल्चर ही ले रहे हैं। नेक्स्ट ये आप देख रहे हैं लाइनबद्ध खेती है, लोगों के अलग अलग तरह की फसलें लगा रहे हैं, लोग किस तरह से गोबर की खाद डाल के उसको मिला रहे हैं अलग अलग तरह से। और ये मल्चिंग आधारित लाइनिंग का जो हमारे यहाँ कल्चर है, इससे उत्पादन भी बढ़ा है और तमाम तरह की चीजें हम करने में सफल हो पाए। नेक्स्ट, ये कुछ चीजें हैं वो जो मैं बात कर रहा था, वही फोटोग्राफ्स हैं जो आप देख पा रहे हैं। नेक्स्ट, ये अचीवमेंट थ्रू द वाटर यूज इफिशिएंसी की हम बात कर रहे हैं कि मोर देन 4 बिलियन लीटर वाटर हैज बीन सेव्ड। ये एक इम्पॉर्टेंट डेटा है जो लोग हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट हैं उन सबके लिए। हैज बीन इन सेव्ड थ्रू द वाटर यूज इफिशिएंसी एंड एक्सटेंडेड वाटर ऑफ द irrigations more than in 725 hectare farm lands. So this is this like a case study presenting in there. So the total 10 billion liter water has harvested due to the various project interventions in Jalon and Hamirpur districts. So ये some data है और इसके आधार पर आप सब इसको देख सकते हैं, कर सकते हैं। So basically the further the billions liter water saved due to the intervention adopted. तो और ये सारी चीजें, और मैं यहाँ पे बताना चाहूँगा कि इसी के आधार पर मुझे पिछले साल, तब से तो अभी ऑनलाइन ही हुआ, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ वाटर जो जल शक्ति ने इसी को लेके परमार्थ को फर्स्ट प्राइज दिया था, खासतौर से वाटर कंजर्वेशन के ऊपर। तो मिनिस्ट्री का ये जो पहला जो वर्चुअल नहीं बल्कि जिसको कहा जाए फिजिकल हुआ था, उसमें परमार्थ को सबसे ज़्यादा नंबर मिले थे और इसी केस स्टडी पे हमें फर्स्ट प्राइज प्राप्त हुआ था जल शक्ति का। नेक्स्ट, so basically the central schemes such as Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee, Manrega and rural water supply schemes, the ग्राम जो हम बात कर रहे हैं, सड़क योजना, इन तमाम सारी जितनी भी योजनाएं हैं, खासतौर से तो through the massive awareness and campaign in the planning process and water use master plan, this is the very good tools for in planning. So basically the in recently government start and Atal Bhujal Yojana. So basically the using of this water user master plan is very intensively in all the villages of the water scarce panchayats. So they have been prepared in water user master plan. So Parmarth is the pioneer of the water user master plan. There's a lot of knowledge and also not a prepared in water user master plan. Also we will prepared in all implemented by through support by panchayat in some village, the good results or in village level. Also this is the my some photographs. So water user master plan you will in preparation of community in what sharing the gram sabha meeting. Yeah, next. So some the photograph for village level peoples and discussing about the plan. Next. So next. Some photographs about the in self governance helping the villages in बुंदेलखंड। तो ये कुछ हमारे काम को लेके जो कुछ अंग्रेजी के अखबार, बहुत सारे लिंक्स हैं। अगर आप जल सहेली पे जाएंगे, ढेरों सारी चीज़ें हैं, बुक्स भी हैं, अलग अलग तरह से मिलेंगे। तो ये कुछ चीज़ें हैं जो हमने आपको यहाँ पर शेयर किए। और समय की बाध्यता है, बेसिकली द लिमिटेशन ऑफ द टाइम, सो वी विल द प्रेजेंटिंग इन ए वेरी short case study. We will invite to the questions and queries all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanjay sir. congratulations first of all on receiving the first prize for your organization from Ministry of Jal Shakti. Heartiest congratulations from all of us. And definitely, agar aap dekh rahe honge, if you're seeing the messages from the participants, your commendable work is really being saluted and congratulated. So congratulations from our side and from all of us in the participants as well. So sir, there are a few questions and I would like to put them in front of you about could you please share insights about how you ensure engagement of women? आपने वैसे बता दिया है कि वहाँ पे महिलाओं का किस तरीके से आप engagement बनाकर रखते हैं from the but how about people from the marginalized communities? Because the region is highly patriarchal, पुरुष प्रधान समाज है और women still practice पर्दा और caste system बहुत ज़्यादा है, तो किस तरीके से उनकी भागीदारी को आप ensure करते हैं? How do you ensure that?
So basically मैं बताना चाहूँगा कि दरअसल जैसा आपने बताया कि पुरुष प्रधान समाज है, जैसे हमारे इलाके में बड़े पैमाने पे खास तौर से अभी भी ये जो स्थिति है वो ये स्थिति है कि लोग शादियां नहीं होती हैं क्योंकि पानी और अभाव है। बहुत जगह से लड़कियां खरीद के लाते हैं, फिर वो शादी करते हैं और पांचाली सिस्टम है कि एक घर में 5 भाई हैं, एक महिला है। वो एक अलग तरह की परिस्थितियों में लोग करके अलग अलग देश के अलग हिस्से से उड़ीसा और छोटा नागपुर और इस इलाके से लोग लेके आते हैं। तो ऐसे इलाके में महिलाओं को संगठित करना बहुत कठिन काम था। शुरू के दिनों में हमने और हमारे टीम ने बहुत सारी यातनाएं झेली, बहुत सारे कष्ट झेले, बहुत सारी चीज़ों को आगे करने की कोशिश की। उन सब के वजह से जो हम सफल हो पाए वो रेगुलर और मैसिव जिसको कहा जाए कि हमारा जुड़ाव, लगातार संवाद करने के साथ साथ परिवर्तन। जो लोग कल तक जिन महिलाओं का मजाक उड़ाते थे, उन मजाक उड़ाने वाले लोगों के गांव में जब उन्हीं महिलाओं ने कुआं बनाया, उन्हीं महिलाओं ने पानी बनाया। आपको बताते हुए मुझे हर्ष हो रहा है कि गूगल ने हमारे जल सहेलियों के ऊपर पिक्चर्स बनाए हैं और अभी एक पूरी 3 घंटे की एक मूवी जल सहेली के ऊपर एक इस देश के बड़े फिल्म डायरेक्टर बनाने जा रहे हैं। अक्टूबर से उसकी शूटिंग शुरू होगी और वो शूटिंग में पूरे इस इशू को कैप्चर किया जाएगा। उम्मीद है कि अगर ये लॉकडाउन और कोविड की परिस्थितियों से निजात मिला तो 2021 के आखिरी में 2022 के शुरुआत तक हम एक फुल फ्लेज मूवी जो है वो इस पूरे इश्यूज के ऊपर देख पाएंगे और जिसमें समझ पाएंगे कि कितनी चुनौतियां थी, कितने सारे काम थे और उन सब कामों के वजह से किस किस तरह की हमें कीमत चुकानी पड़ी।
जी सर, धन्यवाद। और सर, हाउ मेनी जल सहेलीज आर देयर इन अ विलेज?
एक गांव में 2 से लेके 4 जल सहेली हैं और ये वो जल सहेलियां हैं जिनके मन में डेडिकेशन है, जो बिना किसी लालच के, बिना किसी स्वार्थ के काम कर रही हैं, अपने गांव को पानीदार बनाने के लिए दिन रात दौड़ रही, भाग रही और उनके मन में भी कभी नहीं आता कि पैसा उनके लिए महत्वपूर्ण है। और इस मॉडल की जो सबसे बड़ी यूनिकनेस है कि उन्होंने अपने को पैसे के साथ नहीं जोड़ा हुआ है।
सर, तो इसमें क्या महिलाओं के साथ साथ पुरुषों का भी इन्वॉल्वमेंट है सस्टेनेबल एग्रीकल्चर में स्पेशली?
देखिए पहले तो ज्यादातर तो हमारी पानी पंचायत है उसमें 80% तक महिलाएं हैं। शुरुआत के दिनों में तो पुरुष नहीं जुड़ते हैं, लेकिन जब उनके गांव में परिवर्तन आने शुरू होते हैं तो अब जिन गांव में हम कहें तो पुरुषों का भी सपोर्ट है और हमने गांव के लेवल पे अलग अलग तरह से जो वाटर यूजर प्लान्स बनाए हैं उन पुरुषों को भी जोड़ा है और उन पुरुषों का सहयोग भी हमें मिल रहा है। और अब पुरुष को भी संवेदित और एक रेगुलर तौर से हम ना केवल जेंडर के जो ट्रेनिंग चलाते हैं महिलाओं के लिए नहीं, उनको पुरुषों की भागीदारी के लिए। और बहुत अच्छी बात है कि हम वाटर स्कूल चलाते हैं और हमने एक बहुत बड़े पैमाने पर एक सीरीज ऑफ कैरिकुलम तैयार करे, तो बुक्स तैयार किए हैं और सारे बुक्स के आधार पर एक तरह से हम वाटर इंजीनियरिंग का एक रूरल इंजीनियरिंग का एक पाठ्यक्रम बनाते हैं जिसको पुरुष भी पढ़ते हैं और उनके अंदर भी एक बड़ा इंटरेस्ट आता है। और वो पूरा का पूरा पिक्टोरियल है जो लोगों को पढ़ने में बहुत ही अलग अलग कहानियों की कॉमिक्स की तरह, और जैसे हम ये बाल उपन्यास देखते हैं उसी तरह से हमने इसको पूरे से तैयार किया।
दिस इज वेरी वंडरफुल सर, वंडरफुल। सर, एक सवाल है कुछ लोगों का कि व्हाई डिड यू चूज बुंदेलखंड फॉर दिस जल सहेली एंड पानी पंचायत मॉडल?
मैं सबसे पहले तो मैं बताना चाहूँगा कि इसके पीछे का बड़ा कारण है कि मैंने वो उस पिछड़े इलाके में जन्म लिया और मैं उसी इलाके का रहने वाला हूँ। यद्यपि मैंने अलग अलग समय पे बहुत सारे देश भर में पढ़ाई करी और बहुत सारे जगह जाने का मौका मिला, लेकिन मुझे लगा कि मैंने जिस मिट्टी में जन्म लिया और मैंने जब जहाँ जन्म लिया था, मैं जिस गाँव में पैदा हुआ था, उस गाँव में पानी का इतना संकट था कि आप कल्पना करिएगा कि 120 फीट से गहरा पानी हमें निकालना पड़ता था। जिस पानी की रस्सी से हम पानी निकालते थे उसका ही वजन 10 किलो से ज़्यादा होता था। और जब हम 2 बाल्टी में नहाना, कपड़ा धोना और पानी की किल्लत पैदा होते ही हमने देखी, तो मैंने अपने मन में तय किया था कि हम शायद इसके लिए काम कर पाएंगे। और ईश्वर की कृपा कि मैं इस तरफ मुड़ गया और अपने जीवन को मैंने इस दिशा में लगा दिया।
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू फॉर शेयरिंग। सर आप ये बताइए, आप रूरल एरियाज में आपका काम है, आप व्हाट इज योर टेक ऑन द ड्राउट सिचुएशन इन द अर्बन एरियाज? अगर आप इसके ऊपर थोड़ा फोकस कर सकते हैं। आजकल बहुत सारा टेरेस गार्डन के ऊपर लोग काम कर रहे हैं, बट गवर्नमेंट इनिशिएटिव अर्बन सेक्टर पे कम है। तो आपका क्या रिकमेंडेशंस है कि वी कैन एजुकेट पीपल टू ब्रिंग अबाउट कॉन्शियसनेस?
सिमी, मैं ये कहना चाहूँगा कि अभी जो अप्रोच है वो ये है कि हम जड़ों को तो सुखा रहे हैं, टहनियों में नहीं रहे। तो ये जो अप्रोच है ये क्योंकि जो ड्राउट है ये अर्बन है, और मैं ये दावे के साथ कह सकता हूँ कि मैं पानी का विद्यार्थी हूँ, इसलिए कह सकता हूँ। आज हम 21 में आपसे 29 मई को बात कर रहे हैं, और आप 25 में 29 मई को अगर हम बात करेंगे, भारत में आप देखेंगे कि 25 से 30% लोगों के लिए पानी की उपलब्धता कठिन हो जाएगी आने वाले 4 साल में। कृष्णा, गोदावरी, कावेरी जैसी बड़ी नदियां भी 4-4 महीने तक समुद्र से नहीं मिल पा रही हैं। गंगा में रिपोर्ट पढ़ रहा था कि बनारस में गंगा में इतनी ज्यादा पानी में नीलापन आ गया, इतना काई और सैलाब बढ़ गया कि जो कभी तक आज तक नहीं देखा था। जिस तरह से पानी घट रहा है वो आने वाले दिनों में अर्बन एरिया में और खास तौर से जो ये पर कैपिटा पानी की उपलब्धता है ये कम होगी, और पानी रहेगा ही नहीं। जल जीवन मिशन जैसी स्कीम सरकार ने लगाई है, लेकिन सोर्स में जब पानी नहीं होगा तो हम पानी दे कहाँ से पाएंगे? तो जिस तरह से अभी ऑक्सीजन की कमी हुई और अचानक से ऑक्सीजन कंसंट्रेटर इजाद हुआ और लोग ऑक्सीजन कंसंट्रेटर के लेने के लिए दिल्ली जैसे शहर में लोगों ने कितनी कालाबाजारी और ये सारी चीजें हुई, ऐसी कुछ दिनों में पानी के लिए कुछ मशीनें बनेंगी जो वातावरण में जो पानी है उसको कवर करेंगी, लोगों को पिलाएंगी, और पानी की एक हाहाकार किल्लत होने वाली। शहरों में हमने बड़े पैमाने पे जल संरचनाओं को नष्ट किया है, उनमें बिल्डिंग्स बनाए हैं। अर्बन प्लानिंग और जो खासतौर से हमारे टाउन प्लानर हैं उन्होंने जो ध्यान नहीं दिया है, निश्चित तौर से तापमान बढ़ रहा है। और अभी ताउते और ये उत्कर्ष और ये जो तमाम तरह की चीजें आई हैं, सारी तापमान, और अभी आप देख रहे हैं जिस तेजी से तापमान बढ़ा, तो इस बार भी अगर आप देखें कि फरवरी के बाद अचानक तापमान बढ़ना शुरू हुआ था, जिसके कारण गेहूं की फसल भी कमजोर हुई और बीमारी भी गांव में जो बढ़ी वो कोरोना के लोग नाम दे रहे हैं, तापमान के बढ़ने का भी एक बड़ा कारण है। तो निश्चित तौर से हमें लगता है कि अभी हमको सबको पानी के संरक्षण और चौड़ी पत्ती के पेड़ लगाने के ऊपर काम करना चाहिए, और ये जो बढ़ता हुआ बेतहासा शहरीकरण है इसको नियंत्रित करने की आवश्यकता है।
जी बिल्कुल सर, हमारे कुछ पार्टिसिपेंट्स भी इस रीजन से और अन्य रीजन से भी ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं, जैसे शेखपुरा डिस्ट्रिक्ट और फिर राजस्थान के जगहों से। सो दे आर आल्सो फेस्ड विद द सेम सिचुएशन। सो डेफिनेटली योर स्ट्रेटजीज दैट you have initiated and even implemented that can provide a very strong learning lesson to all these areas. So sir, just to clarify, Bundelkhand area or rural areas में ही आपका काम है, not in the urban areas, correct?
जी
ओके ओके।
हम अर्बन में भी काम कर रहे हैं, रूरल में भी काम कर रहे हैं खासतौर से, लेकिन हमारा फोकस जो है वो रूरल एरिया ज़्यादा है। रूरल एरिया में हम ज़्यादा काम कर रहे हैं और रूरल में अनुभव है। झांसी शहर में हम अर्बन में कुछ चीज़ें कर रहे हैं और सरकार को ये बताने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं खास तौर से पानी कैसे बचेगा, और अर्बन में खास तौर से लेक और बड़े पॉन्ड्स हैं उनके कंजर्वेशंस को लेके हमारी कुछ मुहिम है, और जहाँ पे भी सरकारें हमसे चाहती हैं हम उनको सपोर्ट करने की कोशिश करते हैं।
सर, डीप वाटर रिचार्जिंग में आप किस तरीके से काम करते हैं, where there is a lot of challenge?
सॉरी,
डीप वाटर रिचार्जिंग, हैंड पंप्स वगैरह में डीप वाटर रिचार्जिंग के लिए आप
देखिएगा वाटर रिचार्जिंग में जो हमारा है वो बेसिकली वहाँ का ग्राउंड सिचुएशन क्या है, हाइड्रोलॉजिकल कंडीशंस क्या है, जियोमॉर्फोलॉजिकल कंडीशंस क्या है, और ये पूरा एक साइंटिफिक वे है। जो भी वहाँ पे प्रपोज इंटरवेंशंस है उस इंटरवेंशंस को हम देने की कोशिश करते हैं, तो वहाँ की जरूरत है उसी हिसाब से वहाँ पर हम स्ट्रक्चर्स प्लान करते हैं, डिजाइन करते हैं, उसी तरह से करने की कोशिश करते हैं।
सर, do you give any type of financial support especially to women in practices like vermicomposting or any other smart agricultural technologies?
मैं इसके लिए फाइनेंशियल सपोर्ट जो है वो अलग अलग तरह पे बहुत सारी एजेंसी करती रहती हैं, बहुत सारी एजेंसी देती रहती हैं और देने के साथ साथ लेकिन इस समय भारत में फंड का बहुत क्राइसिस है, तो जिस तरह से हम लोगों को छोटा बहुत सपोर्ट मिल जाता है, खासतौर से जो हमारे डोनर हैं जिनके साथ हम काम करते हैं, वेल्थ हंगर हेल्पेज, अवार्ड और इनके जो सहयोग से जो हम काम कर पाते हैं यूरोपियन यूनियन, तो ये इनके सहयोग में जो पैसे मिलते हैं इनका उपयोग करके और कम पैसे में अधिक काम करने की कोशिश करें।
जी जी सर, काफी सारे सवाल तो आ रहे हैं, but definitely it is everybody is congratulating you and they are inspired by your work. Sir, somebody wants to know, Manas Kumar Senapati ji wants to know what will be the next objective of your project. आपके इस प्रोजेक्ट का अगला क्या नया स्टेप हो सकता है?
देखिएगा हमारा एक बड़ा विजन है कि हमने जो चीज़ें देखी हैं, हम पहले तो जिस इलाके में हैं कि ड्राउट फ्री बुंदेलखंड बनाने की तरफ लगे हुए हैं, उस दिशा में हम पूरी कोशिश के साथ हम लगे हुए हैं। एक जीवन में हम कितने सफल हो पाते हैं, हर गांव में हमारे यहाँ 7000 गांव हैं बुंदेलखंड के, और फिर अपने 21वीं सदी में ये जो बढ़ता जल संकट है, ये इसमें भारत को इस पूरे से बढ़ते जल संकट के ये जो एक दौर है इससे कैसे निकाला जाए, इसके लिए ही हमने पूरी अपनी लाइफ डेडिकेटेड कर दी है, और अगर ईश्वर का सहयोग तो इस समय अपने जीवन को लगाएंगे।
जी, थैंक यू सो मच सर। सर, कल भी महुआ त्रिपाठी मैडम ने एक बात पूछी थी कि शी हैज वर्कड इन बुंदेलखंड फॉर 5 years एंड शी हैज सीन मेनी प्रोजेक्ट्स। फंडिंग इज एलोकेटेड इन द वाटर स्पेस, वहाँ पे टेक्नोलॉजी है, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, कैपेसिटी है, अवेयरनेस है, लेकिन उनके अनुसार ओनरशिप, कम्युनिटी ओनरशिप लैकिंग है। तो अगर आपने भी
नहीं, ऑनरशिप का सवाल नहीं है, ऑनरशिप को डेवलप करना पड़ता है। ऑनरशिप में हमेशा क्या है कि लीडर का बहुत महत्व है। लीडर कौन है, वो इज द लीडर, और वो लीडर का चेहरा क्या है, भारत की पॉलिटिक्स से लेके और सोशल वर्क तक डिपेंड करता है कि लीड कौन कर रहा है। मुझे तो नहीं लगता है कि कहीं पे भी ऑनरशिप का सवाल है। ऑनरशिप को आप देंगे, कितना करेंगे आप, माफ करिएगा कि जो एक प्रोजेक्ट अप्रोच से कभी काम नहीं होगा, मूवमेंट अप्रोच से काम करना पड़ेगा, तभी जाके काम हो पाएगा। और हमने अपने काम में कभी प्रोजेक्ट की तरह नहीं काम किया, हम एक मूवमेंट की तरह और एक उस तरह से बहुत सारी चीजों के लिए काम करते हैं।
सर, एक और क्वेश्चन है कि अबाउट
सिमी में एक माफी चाहिए, 11:30 से मेरा एक और इम्पोर्टेंट मीटिंग है।
जी जी सर, 11:30 बोले।
हाँ, तो 11:30 से मेरा एक मीटिंग है और टाइम हो रहा है।
सॉरी सर, सॉरी, जस्ट वन मोर लास्ट क्वेश्चन सर, अबाउट हाउ दीज कलेक्टिव वाटर रिजुविनेशन इनिशिएटिव्स जो आपका है, इट हाउ कैन इट डेवलप अ सेंस ऑफ जेंडर इक्वालिटी? मतलब इतनी सारी महिलाएं हैं और आप उनके साथ काम कर रहे हैं, तो ओवरऑल पिक्चर में आपने ये क्या देखा है कि इट इज लीडिंग टुवर्ड्स जेंडर इक्वालिटी?
एग्जैक्टली वाटर हम बात कर रहे हैं कि महिलाओं ने इंटाइटलमेंट तक गई हैं, वो पानी के वितरण, पानी के प्रबंधन, पानी कहाँ होगा, कैसे होगा, ये हमारे गांव में महिलाएं कर रही हैं। अभी गांव में एक तालाब बन रहा है, उस तालाब में पानी आने के रास्ते से लेके सबका नेतृत्व तो वो कर रही हैं। उदाहरण के तौर पे कल ही हम एक गांव में गए थे झांसी के, मैंने देखा कि एक जगह तालाब बन रहा है, जल सहेली खुद खड़े होकर मजदूरों को गाइड कर रही है कि ऐसे खोदिए, ये करिए, यहाँ से पानी लाएंगे, यहाँ से आएंगे। देख के जितनी खुशी हुई उसको हम अपने शब्दों में बयान नहीं कर सकते। ये एग्जैक्टली उनका जो मॉडल है वो उससे पता चलता है कि आप उन्हें अवसर कितने देते हैं।
जी सर, एक शब्द में, एक लाइन में अगर आपको बोलना होगा, हमें मैसेज देना होगा कि हाउ डू वी यूज वाटर जुडिशियसली, बिकॉज यूएन का भी इस साल का मैसेज है वैल्यूइंग वाटर, यूएन वाटर का, तो आप एक लाइन में मैसेज क्या है?
मैं तो कहूँगा कि बहुत कॉमन सा है, लेकिन मैं ये कहना चाहूँगा कि जल और जीवन, अगर हमें जीवन को बचाना है तो जल को बचाना ही हो और उसको संरक्षित करना ही हो।
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Your work is so commendable, and if any one of you, in the participants, you would want to join hands, in the large-scale efforts that is being undertaken by Parmarth Samaj Sevi Sansthan and Dr. Sanjay Singh at the village level to ensure water is available for everyone, I would really want to encourage you and also exhort you to please reach out to Dr. Sanjay Singh or even to us. We'll be happy to connect you, not just as a practitioner, but also in terms of research, ground level research. It will be very, very amazing. It will hold a lot of amazing results, and perhaps you can mirror this kind of activities in your own regions, wherever you are staying. So congratulations.
एक क्वेश्चन मैं अभी संजय सर से पूछ लूं सर, जैसे परमार्थ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ये कर रहा है, तो सर युवाओं के लिए इस चीज को चरितार्थ करने में कई मुश्किलात आते हैं, कई बार प्रोजेक्ट वगैरह से भी मन लग जाता है, इधर उधर भाग जाते हैं, वो कंसिस्टेंसी नहीं बन पाती है। इसके बारे में आप क्या बोलेंगे कि ग्राउंड में किस तरह का कमिटमेंट या कैसे अपने मन को लोग बनाए, क्योंकि सब लोग प्रयास करना चाहते हैं, तो वो कैसे इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज्ड हो, आप उसके बारे में कुछ युवा साथियों?
देखिएगा इस देश में युवा, इस समय भारत एक युवा राष्ट्र है, और भारत एक युवा राष्ट्र है। युवाओं के साथ सबसे बड़ी जो प्रॉब्लम है वो ये है कि उनकी एकाग्रता बहुत जल्दी टूट रही है। कंसंट्रेटर जो उनका कहा जाए, कंसंट्रेशन जो है वो भटक रहा है, क्योंकि उनके पास में इस समय जो युवाओं की सबसे ज़्यादा जो सोच है वो ये सोच है कि कम मेहनत में कैसे ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा पैसा कमा सकें, कैसे एक अच्छे घर में रह सकें, कैसे एक बड़ी गाड़ी ले सकें, कैसे। और युवाओं के साथ जो हमने देखा है कि वो मेहनत कम करना चाहते हैं और हासिल बहुत ज़्यादा करना चाहते हैं, और इसके लिए कुछ युवा ऐसे हैं कि जो अपने को तपाना चाहते हैं। बेसिकली इन युवाओं के कार्यकर्ता निर्माण की बहुत बड़ी ज़रूरत है, और हम अपनी पीढ़ी के लोगों को और हमारे आगे वाली पीढ़ी के लोगों को भी कहेंगे कि वो कार्यकर्ता निर्माण का जो काम था भारत में वो इस समय नहीं हो रहा, जिसके निर्माण की बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है। क्योंकि जब तक आपके सामने कोई रोल मॉडल नहीं होगा, कोई आदर्श नहीं होगा, तब तक युवा प्रभावित नहीं होंगे, और लोगों को एक रोल मॉडल की तरह से युवाओं के सामने उभरना पड़ेगा। उससे युवा संवेदित होकर शायद ये राष्ट्र के जो ये आने वाली चुनौतियां हैं उनके निर्माण की तरफ आगे लग सकते हैं।
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू सो मच। आपका मीटिंग भी है, एंड वी रियली आर ऑनर्ड एंड ग्रेटफुल दैट यू कुड स्पेयर योर टाइम and early in the morning and talk to all of us. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
So, so with this amazing presentation and ground level realities, we would now move to another practitioner, Mr. Tikender Singh Panwar, and I would like to introduce all of you to Mr. Tikender Singh Panwar. Mr. Panwar is the former Deputy Mayor of Shimla. He is also visiting senior fellow at IMPRI. He is also the national convener of NCU, National Coalition for Inclusive and Sustainable Urbanization. He has represented Shimla as a policy maker at multiple national and international platforms. He is an eloquent orator, and he articulates his thoughts in a manner that connects directly with the common people, and you would know during the course of his lecture. He is a prolific writer and is a regular contributor to print and electronic media. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us from Shimla, and over to you. So if you could make your presentation in like 25 minutes, and then we can have more discussions.
My God, 5 minutes. I don't have a presentation, Simi.
Okay, yes.
So
Sir.
you said in how much time you want?
25 minutes.
Oh, yeah. That's more than enough. I heard 5 minutes.
No. Yeah.
5 minutes will be interested of yours.
Over to you, sir. Over to you.
Okay, thanks. So, and what I can make out is, how do you want me to speak? Is it in Hindi, English? Or?
You can go English. You can go English,
Sure.
And at some places maybe.
Okay. Oh, so you have a very large number of participants here. I can make out nearly 700. Huh? Arjun, what you've done now? Anyway, so thank you for inviting me to this, and it's really wonderful to be here on the third day. And I'm not sure. I hope I'm audible properly.
Perfect, sir. Loud and clear.
Okay. And I'm not sure whether I'll be able to do justice to this training program, because I am quite contrary to the stream that actually flows. And when I say when I'm quite contrary, it is to the present discourse of climate change, how we have to deal with the challenges of climate change and the solutions per se also, because I'm actually, and those arguments that I'm going to forward. And of course, then I would love to have an interactive session and with people who are there in large numbers. So yeah, thank you once again. And there are 4 set of points that I think I would like to sum up my discussion. And unfortunately, as I told Dr. Arjun and Simi to you also now, I don't make presentations, and most of my dialogue is quite extempore. So going by the people and how they would respond. Yeah, but I think there are 4 important things that that I would like to discuss about. My first question is, what are we talking about? Are we talking about sustainability of the people, systemic sustainability, or sustainability of the system that is capitalism? I mean, what are we talking about? But if we see the trajectory of development right from 2008, when we had the financial meltdown, and then we of course had these from Millennium Development Goals, we switched over to the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the arguments that has been professed, and in a very clandestine manner, is actually to sustain this system, and the system that I call neoliberal capitalism since the last 4 decades. I'll try to explain in a bit. Probably it will be difficult for our participants to understand, but I'll try to make it simpler later. So I'm completely against that. Why should I want a system which is highly exploitative, a system which is completely iniquitous, a system which has horrendously exposed our planet and not made it fit for our survival and for the survival of the planet? Why should I sustain such a system? So I think I staunchly stand against the present mode of sustainability. If someone argues that, look, the present system must be sustainable. So what should be the alternate sustainable system? I think that is also what is important that I would like to lay upon. But let's start from the SDGs. And but one thing that has really come up, especially in the last 2 years, is that it has this period has completely exposed us. It has exposed us, our systems. When the pandemic struck, that look, this system is completely unsustainable. This with the kind of development that we are passing through, we are not able to attain what we think that we will be able to attain by 2030 under the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 SDGs that we're talking about. So it has brought forward that, but nevertheless, I think it is important that we have an equitable world, harmonious with nature, and I think, but that exposure has been very stark. So I term it as a catastrophe, and one of the forms in which this catastrophe, the hollowness of this system was exposed, is the pandemic. But I think the 4 elements. First, that I would like. That are very important. The first happens to be climate change. Some of the scientists feel it's not real science. There are arguments given that, look, you can't really tame Mother Nature, and actually it's a period of warming up, and then you'll have again ice age after 15,000 years. Even if that argument is true, Simi, even if that argument is true, I think we have no right to ruin the way we are ruining our planet. But I don't buy that argument. I mean, to me, I think climate science is a real science, and the impact that we're witnessing because of changes are actually real. So just to cite two, I think, because they are participants and they're students, one that they must go through is the Anatomy of a Silent Crisis. It's by the World Human Report. I mean, it's a fantastic report. It gives us a vivid picture of, how climate, the climate change has impacted our lives, and not just our lives, the whole question of climate justice, I mean, who are the ones who are the propounders of carbon emissions, and who are the ones who are actually getting affected? Of course, both are being affected. But if you see the proportion, I mean, this Anatomy of a Silent Crisis exposes the fallacy of the argument, and then we go back to the Kyoto Protocol, where common but differential responsibility comes. I think that is one important area we should never miss sight of. And from there, I think some of the scientists are even saying that, our time is gone. 2008, 2018, we have completely exhausted. Some say, no, still 10 years left to really mitigate the crisis that we're witnessing if we are able to reduce our emissions by 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's what we agreed in Paris, where I was also a delegate representing the cities. And vociferously, we were arguing for some proactive interventions. But some believe, nevertheless, even if we have 10 years, I mean, I think that is important. So the point is, I mean, why I'm saying, I mean, I go against the stream, is that half of the world's man-made atmospheric carbon dioxide was emitted in the last 30 years. I again repeat, Simi, half of the world's man-made atmospheric carbon dioxide was emitted in the last 30 years. And in this period, 20 companies, I again reiterate, if our students want to name, I can name them. I don't want to name them here. 20 companies produced 33% of the world historic emissions. So just see this thing. In the last 30 years, we emitted half of what was emitted since we became, since the evolution of a species of human beings. But at the same time, in these last 30 years, it's just 20 companies that produced 33%. So what is to be done? I mean, one simple, it's not a Herculean task. Anyone would.
Sir, we are getting requests from the participants. If you can speak a little slower and louder.
Okay. I'll
little louder.
Slower. Yeah. So I think what I'll do is I'll put the mic closer to my mouth.
Yes, that's better. Yes,
yeah, okay.
Thank you, sir. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please. I again reiterate. So I think this is something very important. So I think what we need to do, and these 20 companies are still grabbing subsidies for fossil fuels. We know what needs to be done. So the World Humanitarian Report on Anatomy of Silent Crisis, the first thing. So the second thing is, actually, when we deal with climate science, climate change, what is also important to know is that it's not equitable. There's a question of climate justice. I mean, there's a question of the system. Unless and until we hit the system, I don't think we are going to achieve anywhere near to the Sustainable Development Goals. That's the first thing. The second thing is, which is again leading to the catastrophe, is the losses of biodiversity and what we call redundancy. Now, one would say, what is redundancy? According to me, redundancy is very important. Am I clear on that? Redundancy, is the word clear? Okay, because you said be slower. So, which I call is mutual living of people, of species, and this is at the rate in which this is getting accelerated is not found in any record since we know the Cretaceous extinction some 66 million years ago. That's when we had the Jurassic and all that stuff. So that is the loss of biodiversity. Now, some of the scientists argue, hey, what is the harm in the loss of biodiversity? When human beings came, Homo sapiens, 70% of the mammals were already extinct. So what is the problem with that? No, there's a big problem. I think biodiversity happens to be a very important reason for us to worry about. Why? I think why also, and there are scientists who argue, and the very funny arguments that I've seen from some of the capitalist pen pushers and scientists who say, and there is a interconnection between honeybees and us. Honeybees are extinct, we are gone. Okay, we should know this. One basic. So they say even if honeybees get extinct, we'll bring in robotic honeybees. So, I mean, we can imagine. So I think that's something very important when we talk about climate science, climate change, and the loss of biodiversity that we are witnessing. The third element, I think, which is also very important, is the vast excesses of nitrogen that we are really pushing in the environment through fertilizers and, runoff to our rivers, to our oceans, and which is risking some anoxic extinctions. Now, again, it is linked to our biodiversity stuff. I mean, and we know we've seen how hypoxia was killing our people during the pandemic. So anoxic is actually which actually it's in a higher form of hypoxia. So we can understand. The fourth thing is, I think, and that is very important, where actually lots of interventions are to be made, and that pertains to actually the change of land use pattern that we are witnessing, causing water scarcities, usurping the urban commons and whatnot. Now, take for example, let me cite a few examples, maybe a little controversial ones for our participants. Probably they will be able to understand better when we cite controversial, examples. So, but before that, I think one of the, again, contrary to the belief and contrary to the discourse, is that majority of the climate scientists, and this is what I witnessed in Paris when I was there for the climate talks, and also in Quito for when we went for the Habitat 3, the World Habitat 3 for a Sustainable World. Most of these scientists actually reduce our struggle towards reductionism. Okay, they think actually climate science is like, you reduce it to climate science and everything will be done. I don't think that is true. Actually, we have to understand the interplay of forces, the interplay of systems, and unless and until we are able to get into this interplay of systems, that's why I said the neoliberal capitalism, which has dominated the world in the last 4 decades, actually is also, and that's why these 30 years are so very important when we talk about the carbon emissions. But I think not just to, especially for our young participants, the mere reductionism, they actually paralyze even the struggle for a better intervention. And of course, there are many complex systems that we have to work on. So just to cite 4 very critical and very controversial things, which we are a witness to. One, the amendments to the Jnk Act, when we saw the abrogation of Article 370, lots of us, we thought that, look, it is, integration of India, mind you. And I'll come to that. Second, the kind of real estate development and, usurping the powers of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and bringing in a large real estate in the Andamans. Third, we've just seen Lakshadweep. Again, apart from all the other orders, one of the order pertains to the real estate development. Fourth, the changes that are brought out in the environment impact assessment, completely diluting those EIA laws and, making it a laughable commodity.
Tikender, sir.
Do not want my
internet from the 4th point. Yes, from the 4th point.
Huh?
From the 4th point, we couldn't hear you. You just froze.
From the 4th point means the land use change pattern.
After EIA, sir.
After?
EIA.
Oh, EIA, yeah. So that's close by.
Yeah.
So the environment impact assessment. So the point is that we have to actually understand the interplay of changes, the interplay of forces. And so not just to reduce it to mere reductionism. That's all I want to just bucket here. The next deal, it's, and you can see why it is important is now we can see also some of the positive interventions, and not just in India, but take, for example, the new Green Deal that is coming up, where Biden, who had thought, tell me, Simi, had you ever imagined a year ago, maybe a few years ago, when Trump just walked out of the Paris deal, that we could even have a new Green Deal kind of stuff in US happening? So, and that is what we are witnessing. At the same time, we are witnessing the Labour parliamentarians, and actually they're really influencing the policy paradigm in London, where they're saying, look, we are going to democratize even the climate science. So what does that mean? It means that all those companies who do not conform to the climate science and do not conform to A, B, C, D, E, whatever other parameters, would be taken to task. This is something we're not hearing here. I think that is what one of the important questions that I wanted to raise. So I bucket those 4 points here. Now, moving from here, I think why it is important that climate science, interplay of forces, and the kind of system we are living in are all interrelated. And this leads me to John Claus, who I have been quoting time and again. And since the discussion also pertains to climate science, inequality, and the Sustainable Development Goals, there is a strong relation between this entire process or multiple processes that I'm talking about. So I think in UN Habitat 2016, I think, just correct me if it is 2000, I think it is 2016, John Claus, the executive director of UN Habitat, while inaugurating that conference, he said, hey, if we have to imagine, forget about attaining the Sustainable Development Goals, if we have to imagine to reach somewhere close by the SDGs, then this whole business of laissez-faire, that's free market economy, will have to be revisited, and we have to go back to the basics of planning. So what does that mean? I'm to ensure that it's an equitable world. And the why? I think this leads me to the second argument, that there is a strong relationship between climate change, demand for climate justice, and the sustainability of people, inequality, and gender parity. Now let me substantiate it. Simi, are you there? Because just remind me, I don't know how many former
yes, sir,
mayors
you
or deputy mayors
have another 10 minutes.
Yeah, because, once, former deputy mayor, and once I have such a large number of participants, I can go,
yes, sir.
from the period.
10 minutes
just
and
remind me.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'll just, So let me try to explain what does that mean, actually, when he says, so I think in the last 4 decades, we've seen the rampant, the most brazen form of neoliberal capitalism in city development, and where privatization has been a key driver, along with commoditization of use values. And this has actually also widened the massive gap. Now let me just qualify this statement. What does it mean? From use value to exchange value. Now, I don't know how many of the participants come from the stream of political economy, but let me just try to explain. Take, for example, water. Now, how do we consider water to be? If I ask a question to our participants, what do you think? Is water a need or water a right? I think most of them will say, oh, of course, it's a need. Well, that's the Washington consensus that actually makes us believe that, look, water is a need. So if water is a need, then you have lots of forces in the market that can provide water through distillery, through sewers. But if water is a right, then mind my words, then I accrue some right. I mean, as a citizen, as people, we accrue some right vis-a-vis the state. So I think water is a right. Of course, water is the existence, I can see. But at the same time, so when I say this transformation from use value to exchange value, I see a humongous kind of expropriation of capital, expropriation of surplus coming out from these use value to exchange values. Water happens to be one of the major areas. Likewise, health. And I think the pandemic has completely exposed us. Spain is now again revisiting and again going back to the basics, whether they should nationalize their health or not. We have seen one of the largest actually health budgets in US, but it's not on public health, it's on private health. And we've seen how the system has faltered, how it has failed. So these use values, which were of use to me as an individual, to us as people, were systematically commoditized in the last 4 decades or so. And I'll explain that. Likewise, health, education. So some of the utilities, which were considered to be my right, actually got transformed into anyone can provide it. It could be provided by the state, the apparatus of the state, municipalities, or by some private players. And we've seen abject privatization of health services, even in a country like India, where before the pandemic, I think 80% of the OPD patients were treated by the private sector and 60% of the indoor patients were treated by the private sector. But when the pandemic struck, and this was systematically done in the last 3 to 4 decades, where the state withdrew from this important sector. I think that is very important for us to understand. Why I believe, because this huge inequity that also gets created and which can never be filled in. And I think there's Ursula Hughes. I mean, she's an economist. You can Google her name. And in her research, she finds out that of the 20 largest transnational corporations in the world, I again repeat, 20 largest transnational corporations of the world have shifted their portfolio from finance to utilities because there is huge profit. And actually, national governments, provincial governments, and our city governments were part and parcel of this ongoing process where massive flow of money took place from the hands of the people to actually large capital and also increasing inequity massively. Now, the second phenomenon that we are also witnessing while we are finding the widening of inequity is, and what I call the accumulation of capital, has been the chain nature of city governance. Now, I have served the city as a directly elected deputy mayor of Shimla for 5 years. And can you guess, Simi, the first file that came to my office, and which we, of course, we did not allow, and it was under the ages of, is it for me putting the earphones on help?
No, that's just a comment. Yeah, please.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So I hope my flow is fine. Or do I have to further?
Yes.
Slower.
That's just fine, sir. Please continue.
Okay. So I think that is, and I told you, being in the city affairs for 5 years, the first file that came was privatized water. And we didn't allow that to happen, by the way. And we ran the system pretty successful. And just 3 days ago, I saw an article in the Times of India actually praising us, the way we built this new utility. Of course, now I don't know which way it will head. I don't know if we have time, we'll discuss that. Because Arjun was really interested to discuss that.
Tikender sir, if you can give examples of some utilities.
Of water?
Yes, utility companies or other some examples.
Yes, I will later.
Electricity, drainage.
Yeah. So I've parked it. So I think this changed nature of city governance from city managers to city entrepreneurs, and making cities competitive. One city can fight against the other, relaxing their land norms, allowing capital to come in, and but in this form, what has happened is that we compromise some of our most important areas. That's the urban commons, our water bodies, parks, etc., and hand over to the real estate. And we've seen how this has happened massively in Gurgaon. I mean, if you see, Arjun has asked me to give an example. I used to run a show on the television called The Urban Agenda. 50 episodes probably I was able to run. And I was very intrigued to shoot one of the episodes in Gurgaon. And why? Because it was at a lake where I do not know what is the profile of our participants, but if they are too young, they wouldn't know how Shahrukh Khan became Shahrukh Khan. So Shahrukh Khan actually, of course, Shahrukh Khan became Shahrukh Khan because of Shahrukh Khan only, but he came to light by shooting a serial called Fauji, and that was in my teen young days. I was very fond of watching that serial, and that serial was shot in Gurgaon in one of the lakes. So I was intrigued, as an urban, as an urbanist to visit that place, what has happened to that lake. You will be shocked to know that lake is gone and find a multi-story building in Gurgaon. And that's why every rain, Gurgaon is flooded. So just try to understand this. I mean, why I'm bringing, this is a process, and this process is not restricted to one town, but it's actually been almost invariably in all the cities, because that's been the style and the model of our urban development. So yeah, we've seen how these were handed over, and with the argument that, look, houses will be provided for everyone, and we know it has actually increased the severity of housing. Arjun can substantiate that. The problem of housing not actually address the problem. If you just go to Noida, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of buildings people are not able to buy because that there's a complete mismatch. I don't want to go beyond that. So likewise, I think cities were systematically asked to shift their planning process. And if you see, most of these cities, their plans were made not by the city councils, but by large transnational consultants who would come in, who would say, you do not know how to plan your city. You just be there as in the city council. We will make your plans for city development, for city mobility, for sanitation, solar city, and we will ensure that we get investments. And if you see a cursory look at these plans, and of course the smart city plan, a cursory look at the plans would suggest and tell you that 90% of these plans are for capital intensive technologies where the money has to come back from the people. And most of these plans are system. Take, for example, mobility. Why is it you find that there is a rush and push for metros, whereas per kilometer metro costs, I think the capital cost is around 400 crores, whereas bus rapid system, or even if you see the mobility plans of various cities, you'll find in 70 to 80% of the cities, the radius of 80% of the people is not more than 3 kilometers or 4 kilometers, which means they should have better pedestrianized paths, better cycle tracks, better public mobility, instead of this great push for metros. And we find how the metros are behaving in Jaipur, in Bangalore. Where is this cost going to come from? So so this nexus also, I just thought I must point it out, completely unsustainable. I think that's one of the important. The ways we are planning our cities, handing it over to large consultancy firms, and who think only technology, capital-intensive technologies can provide the solution. We have seen this is not going to happen. The third thing, which is also making witness in the cities, is this large transformation that has taken place from the informal, from the formal to the informal sector. And in the last 3 decades, it's jumped from almost 75% to 93, 94%. Now, what does it mean? See, it means, we have that Oxfam report that says that the gap between the 10% top asset holders and the bottom 10% asset holders, that gap is 500 times in rural India. But in urban India, guess what is the variation? It's 50,000 times. Now, all of this that I've been discussing actually led to this massive inequity, informality. And when I say informality, I think it is very important, because 85% of the people who are working in cities do not have a written formal contract. They can get hired in the morning, get fired in the evening. And 90% sustain on just 8,500 rupees a month. So how do you expect people to sustain in such an environment? And I think the other biggest divide that is going to happen is through the Internet of Things. We've seen the Bloomberg report, we've seen the Internet of Things, how it's a $5 trillion economy, and how these smart cities are actually pushing for further widening this gap. I think this will be a serious issue. And this leads me to the point of governance in the cities. Now, this is what Arjun is really interested to talk about, is actually when I'm talking about all of this, from climate change to the massive inequity that exists, to informality that has come up, actually, what are the ways that you address? One of the formal structure happens to be your city governance structures. I do not say that they are perfect. No. Even if they are 10%, 10% to the value that they should have performed, because after the 74th constitutional amendment in 1994, the 18 subjects that were supposed to be transformed, I do not think that even 3 to 4 subjects have been transformed. So we know how the city governments are functioning. But even now, to bypass these city governments and the city governance structures, because people will ask, hey, what about my smart city? What about our Internet of Things? I'm not getting water, say, once in 2 days or 3 days, but I'm getting billed 2,000, 3,000 rupees a month. So so where do they come and where do they raise these questions? It's the city council, it's the city government in the urban centers. So the city council has also been bypassed. And how it has been bypassed? Through the smart city special purpose vehicles. None of these SPVs, I'm telling you, I'm again reiterating, none of the SPVs have a structure where the mayor or any of the members of the city council will be the chairperson or will be leading the SPVs. It's all project-oriented. And we've seen studies. We've seen a study from ICLE, That said, if you link the SPVs and the smart city model, it's not even linked to 0.5% to our climate change adaptability mitigation strategies that we're talking about. And if you see various other reports, so they will point out that it actually increases the inequity in the cities because it's more of area-based development. Then it is, okay, I'll answer that. Keynesian policies might help. I think it may help so maybe later. So I think that is something very important. So we have to revisit our governance structures. What would be a governance structure? I think that is so I'll park it for my later maybe question answer when I just try to conclude it. And finally, this leads me to the gender inequity that exists. The gender inequity flows from all of these things, but the kind of society that we're living in and the vestiges of feudalism that continues in India, we continue to move ahead with caste, abject casteism, and we continue to move with abject anti-women mindset that we have, even in some of our, most developed, instruments of governance. So I think that struggle has to be continuous. But we have a very interesting report. I think that is what I would like to share from the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Index. So I don't really support these indices. I'm really scary of these indices, and I'll comment on that a little later. But and they have pointed out that we fell from 140 to 150. We fell to 140. Our rank is 140 in 156 countries. Just imagine where we are in the global gender gap index. So we can imagine where we are. And this decline particularly happens, that's what I was talking about in the economic participation front, and almost by 3%. And political, and of course the labor participation rate, we've seen how it fell dramatically in the last 1 year when the pandemic struck. And on the political empowerment front, we regressed 13.5 percentage points. It's huge. So we can understand where we are heading. And the labor participation rate, we fell by from almost 24.8 to 22.3%. That's massive. And we have also witnessed that the estimated earned income of women in India is only 20% of men's. Now, what do you do in such a situation, Simi? I hope something is happening in IMPRI. I don't know what is happening in other parts of the world or in India, but it's a precarious situation. 1/5, just imagine, 1/5 is the income of women. They comprise 50% of our population. What do you do in such a situation? And actually that gets reflected in our various structures of governance, of our families, of our hierarchical systems. I think that has to be smashed. How? I think maybe we require more engagement. Maybe we require more discussion. But yeah, that struggle has to be a prolonged one and a continuous one. It's a shame. It's a pity. I really feel very bad when I speak about my country that we fall almost at the bottom 10 in this income hierarchy in the world. I'm talking about. Bangladesh is better than us. I don't believe that, but that's a hard fact. So I think just to sum up, what should be the alternative? We have seen the unsustainability of the present system. We've also seen how starkly it is widening the inequities. And we've also seen, the recent report, the ease of living index. Then we have those funny indices. And I remember Professor Parker, who is the head of that institute that builds the ease of living index. And if you go and search for his videos, you'll find he says, no, ease of living index actually means we have to revisit capitalism in the sense, actually we have to ensure sustainability of capitalism. That's the moot point I'm reiterating. We have to ensure the sustainability of capitalism with maybe a different face. I stand for actually the present system of neoliberal capitalism, which is inherently flawed, which is inherently iniquitous. Actually, we have to find alternatives. Now, what could be those alternatives? Let's discuss that. Now, this is what Arjun is actually provoking me to say. Remunicipalization in many of the Western countries they've found, where they have been able to remunicipalize some of the utilities, and where they have been able to actually pass on the surplus that gets generated in the cities back to its people, what they call the democratization of the surplus. Could be one of the ways. Getting the urban commons, or what we did in Shimla. But Arjun, I'm really warning you, this is not where we intended to land up in Shimla. Now, Shimla is a classical case. Why? Because not just because we were directly elected, but also because here the water utility was in a real mess. Water was being supplied by the parastatal, that's the Irrigation Public Health Department, distributed by the Shimla Municipal Corporation. Of course, when we joined, the same process continued. And interestingly, but it's not that we did this because of our ideological mooring, but it is through an accident that we learned that, look, these systems can't be sustained. I mean, why, fair amount of autonomy for a utility, fair amount of changes in the government structure, and even democratization of these utilities is so essential if you want to bring in those alternatives. Maybe this could make way for other forms of governance structures also to develop. Maybe not just the Keynesian structure that one of the questions has just pointed out, but multiple layers, multiple structures of democratic governance. Like in Kerala, we find the Kudumbashree model, we find the People's Plan, different models. So just focusing on Shimla water supply. So what happened is that in 2015-16, we had this epidemic of hepatitis. And why was there this epidemic? Because there are 5 different streams from which water is being lifted up to Shimla. And by the way, let me tell you, for our participants to know, actually the cost of production of water in Shimla happens to be the highest in the country. I didn't know, my forefathers, my ancestors never knew how to live on the mountains. What we always practiced is, migration. We used to migrate on the top and migrate down during the winter. So summers we used to climb up, winters we used to climb down. But the British, through their engineering feat, through their design, actually they brought in their technological expertise and they taught us how to ruin our mountains. So the first hydroelectric power comes in 1886, where you could heat up even when it is freezing, and with the head of 2,000 meters. Nowhere in the world, by the way. I went to Quito. Even there, I didn't find that much water being lifted to the height. 2,000 meters height, we lift water and then we distribute. So guess what is the cost of production? It is 120 rupees per kiloliter. Can you charge 120 rupees per kiloliter from the people? No, you cannot. Britishers sustained because they had the empire, no? So they had the loot of the empire, and then that's how they could subsidize here in Shimla. But where do we go to loot? I mean, we have to loot our own people. So that's not the way how we can actually advance. So, but that's not the story. I mean, the story is that we inherit the system, and of course, the duality that existed in the system, that since 1994, of the 5 sources that we lift, one of the sources that is called Ashwini Ghat got contaminated in 2005 because 5 kilometers upstream Ashwini Ghat, there was a sewage treatment plant called Malana Treatment Plant. So some of our very erudite engineers constructed a sewage treatment plant 5 kilometers upstream. 2007, every alternate year, there was an outbreak of hepatitis and people died, by the way. 20, 30 people died invariably every alternate year, thousands got infected. So this is the system that we inherited, and it once struck us. And we went back to the government because, it was the government that was supplying water to us. We said, hey, this is your water, which is polluting us, which is actually claiming lives of our people. They said, no, it is at your end. So the government completely refused. Then we got the NIV, National Institute of Virology, Pune. They got the genome tested, like we are testing our the pandemic virus genome. And they said the virus that is there in blood samples, water, and sewage happens to be from one single. They could decode that virus. We again went to the government. We said, now it is your baby. Either you take the entire system. And of course, there were many interventions. Like I registered a police complaint against the engineers. There was this nexus between private and those engineers who never visited those sites. And of course, those engineers were then put behind the bars for, I think, 5 or 6 months. But things started rolling. Why I'm saying this is important, this led to a situation where we asked the government, either you take the system, the entire utility, or you hand it over to us. So the government said, okay, it's a dead snake. Why don't you run the system? We took over. We took over the entire staff, I think 400, 500 from the parastatal. And we created a utility. Instead of putting it directly under the Shimla Municipal Corporation, it was termed the Greater Shimla Water Supply and Sewerage Circle. What does that mean? It means that a utility that will be responsible for lifting water, for treating sewerage, for distribution water, and for the entire management of water and sewage. But under the control of the municipal corporation, and the budget will be decided by the Shimla Municipal Corporation. And at the same, when we took over the system, now imagine a water utility that has a capacity to pump 70 MLD. I hope our participants will be able to understand. 70 MLD means 70 million liters per day. That's almost 7 crore liters per day. And the utility was, because it was in the parastatal hands, there was a duality, it was lifting not more than 25. Okay, so that's 2.5 crore liters per day. Why? Because 50% of the water, more than 50% of the water was getting wasted, leakages, massive leakages, and massive nexus. Now, there's something very interesting, Simi, that you should know. And I don't know whether it is universally, but it could be universal, that the OPEX was far more than the CAPEX. So the operation cost was greater than the capital cost. Why? Because you invested N amount, but more amount was invested to plug the leakages. And there was this nexus between the engineers and the company that was doing that. Once we took over, we changed the entire system. Okay.
Yes, sir. So if you could wrap it up, and we have have some questions.
So just give me 5 minutes, because I think that's an interesting model that our participants would like to know. So once we took over, changed the system, we changed the entire pipe length. The entire length where there were leakages, and of course, because we created this utility, invested this money, and pipes were 100 years old, and that was done in a stretch of 1 year. Why? Because there was one singular kind of integration within the system. Now, the system was not going back to the government, to a parastatal, but one single system. And take for example, one of the water lift schemes called Giri, which was lifting just 10 MLD. Because of the intervention that we did, we were able to lift 20 MLD. That means almost double the water by just repairing 2 kilometers stretch of pipe. So the point is, if that capacity is built within the system, that capacity is integrated, that onus and responsibility is entrusted. And at the same time, you also have that fear that, look, if you do not perform, then there's somebody who's watching you and you can be taken to task, like, those engineers were put behind the jail. That we were able to lift water to almost 50 MLD, that means 5 crore liters. And now probably we are getting some 6 crore liters, that is 60 MLD, which is now being eulogized. So and the beauty is, what I call the resilient intervention. Not a single case of hepatitis has been reported since the municipal corporation took over the utility, 2016. Why? Because A, they abandoned the source. B, the testing, which was completely fraud earlier, now the testing is done by a microbiology lab of the medical college, instead of testing it, in those fake laboratories which never existed properly, and you could get that data on the net. So the point is, integration of the system. Point is responsibility, onus. I think we can create, and it was a great relief to the people. People who were getting water once in 7 days now are getting water every day, and probably now we'll be moving for 24/7. But the catch is, the moment we left 2017, there were elections, and there was this tripartite agreement between World Bank, state government, and the municipal corporation. They converted the Greater Shimla Water Supply Circle into a Satu Jal Nigam. That's a company. Now, what would they do with it? I am not sure. Probably they may privatize water, which we never allowed. Probably they may, of course, it's a ring fence utility. So probably we may land again to where we started from. So, when I say struggle, it's a continuous struggle. But more to that, I think it is the people who have to understand. And it is, I think, different structures and different layers that we have to build. Lastly, to conclude, Simi, I think what is important is that we have to understand, if we are talking about in these governance structures and also structures that we must build, it has to be more citizenry based, where citizen is an equal participant, is an equal stakeholder. Unfortunately, what we're witnessing now is a ruler-ruled kind of discourse, a state which is dangerous, which is completely precarious and dangerous. For example, For the simple reason, we think that a ruler is going to decide, and we are the subjects of the supreme leader. That's not going to sustain our system. That's going to further alienate our people. We've already seen how the smart cities have alienated our people in the decision-making process. So I think we have to make the entire process of decision-making more participatory, more decentralized, and lastly, more democratic. And when I say democratic, it means empowering the local people, the communities, and of course, the local governments. I think with that,
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. You have actually answered some of the questions in your concluding remarks. Certainly, we need a lot of sustained and equitable social structure and a democratic structure. So thank you so much. So I'll just pose one question, which I feel is very important, based on your role as the former mayor of Shimla, is about where do you see the major loopholes towards better implementation of town planning? And are there any concerns vis-a-vis, because hill states require different level of intervention than the plains. So if you could, and they have a different set of challenges themselves. So if you could just briefly respond to this in 2 minutes.
Well, I see the problem at the top in the head. And the top where, the town planning is not being done by the towns, but is throughout the country. I mean, I can understand, Simi, one of the arguments that, look, the small towns do not have the capacity. But does the same argument is validated for Delhi? I mean, which is a state government? I mean, do you think that Delhi is planning for it? It's the parastatal. It's the Delhi Development Authority. It's the Mumbai Development Authority. It's the Bangalore Development Authority. It's the Greater Mohali Area Development Authority. So I think the problem lies at the top. Planning has to be quintessentially a part of the city governance structure. They must be, and if they don't have the capacity, then build that capacity. It's very simple. I go to SPV, to the School of Planning and Architecture, to teach them, how cities must be built. I'm not in the architectural sense, but in the political sense and in the sociological sense. We have massive, we have n mass of people. At least give them 2 years stipend before they after they graduate and they move to post-graduation, to at least build these plans instead of asking the transnational corporations to come. And the other thing where the problem lies is this nexus. People actually underestimate this nexus. The nexus that I have, the whole argument that I've been building, cities being made structures of capital accumulation. And for that, town planning is a very essential part. And our participants must read a book by Samuel Stein called the Capital City, just to have a fair idea of how actually city planning is quite inherent to the process of neoliberal capitalism that we're witnessing. So I think the problem lies there. How do we break that? I think we can break that when we decentralize it, when we democratize it. So decentralized and democratization is the sense. Allow the cities to plan for themselves. Even if they don't plan it well, not a problem. Let's wait for another 5 or 10 years. And I think larger picture, if you see, larger picture, what Kirti Bhai and I we've been advocating is that we desperately now require a second urban commission. It's been long. In 1985, we had the first urban commission. I think we desperately require a second urban commission where we discuss all these issues about decentralization, democratization, inequity, the transformation that has taken place. First urban commission was actually when manufacturing was the determining force in the cities. It's no more now. It's the informal sector. It's the services sector. How do you deal with that? We have not even thought about houses, about housing. We've not even thought about rental housing, labor hostels. I mean, how do we formalize their work, their contracts? I think this is completely unsustainable. So when we speak about and gender, I mean, I did this show, Simi, you'll be shocked. None of the town planners ever think that, look, this woman, women also live in this city. Okay, this town planning deserves to be little, I would say, gender friendly. None, I would say, not a single city I've seen. So, what do you think?
Sure, sir. Sure. Thank you so much. Lots of great comments and congratulations coming to your end. And we really are grateful that you were able to participate. And so if you have time, I know you are a busy person. If you have time, please stay back for one of our final sessions on by Dr. Sanghamitra. And
so what I suggest is, Simi, if you could
yes.
just, I can see lots of questions are there.
Yes,
if
sir.
you could
So
just mail those questions to me and find out
yeah.
who the participants are, I can reply them and then you can further disseminate.
Yes, yes, that we will be doing. We will
because I can understand time is such
yes,
a constraint.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are sorry that we
so
couldn't
is Arjun there?
Yes, yes.
I am here, sir. If you want to stay for some time, then maybe
no, that's
towards
not a
the
problem.
end we can take the questions.
Question answers.
Okay. So let me see. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Tikender Pawar, sir, for your time and for your valuable inputs on the subject. And without any further ado, I would like to invite and introduce Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar, who is our final speaker for the day. And Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar is the technical coordinator states of gender responsive budgeting at UN Women. Previously, she has also been a consultant with the Ending Violence Against Women unit of UN Women. Dr. Dhar is an adept social work practitioner. She's a social researcher and a gender expert with more than a decade of experience at the grassroots level, academia, and international organizations. And she specializes on issues of gender inequality, involuntary resettlement issues, and child rights issues. She has led programs on female feticide and infanticide in the states like Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, which are considered endemic on the issue. And she has been a mission expert for UN Women. She has handheld the government of Nagaland to implement gender responsive budgeting in their state policies. And previously, she was also engaged as a staff consultant and social development specialist to the Asian Development Bank to work on the resettlement and rehabilitation issues in the state's road project in Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand in 2007. So thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us, and apologies for extending the time for a bit, but over to you, ma'am. Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar, can you hear me? Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar, can you hear me? Ma'am, you're not audible. No, you're not. Ma'am, you're not audible. Maybe you could consider leaving the program and rejoining. Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
till Sanghamitra ma'am, just give me a heads up when you join. So can we take a few questions for Tikender sir? They are very important actually. Tikender sir. Sir, are you there? Yeah. So we are back with you because okay.
Give me one moment, Simi.
Yeah, no problem.
I will be a little late. Yes, please tell me.
Yes, sir. So one very important question is about your take on the development versus disaster as the mayor of Shimla, and what were your initiatives, sir, for especially for women and women empowerment and strengthening equality, gender equality in Shimla?
If you ask me, there were none. I tried, and there was a very funny thing. You must share. I'll share that anecdote with you, by the way. Yeah. So let me first. So I think I should start from here and then go to the generic question: disaster versus development. So in the structure of the Shimla Municipal Corporation, I was the chairperson of the Social Justice Committee. So, comprising women, gender, and all social issues. So once I initiated this effort and for gender budgeting. Okay, so we said, yeah, this is very essential. So we've made part of, so when we created a budget, so it was gender budgeting was quite an certain general things which we did, and we then further quantified into gender budgeting. My internet connection stays unstable. Is it okay? Are you able to listen?
I am able to, yeah.
Okay, fine. So when we organized this meeting, we tried to get in as many, participants from women activists, from different streams. And one of my classmates, who happened to be the IPS officer there in Shimla, she was posted there. She also joined. Just to. So she heard the entire discussion of gender budgeting, and we said, okay, this, the demands, etc. So in the end, you know what she said? She said, Tikender, forget about anything. You at least construct a women toilet in front of the Vidhan Sabha. I said, why do you want that? She said, when you guys come at the Vidhan Sabha, my men folk go and pee around anywhere, but the women and they don't drink water because they don't have any place to pee around. So the first thing that did Simi after that was, because Vidhan Sabhas are, where protests take place, and these women cops have no place, So small things, can you imagine? I never realized this is such an important thing. So the point is, I think, it's all said and done. But at the same time, how do we really mainstream gender budgeting in the entire process of budget? I think the local governments have really to think over, really to scratch, despite the fact that we have 50% women reservation, which is very good, by the way. So we can really understand when parks are being constructed. So they say, no, this is also required. That is also required. But to mainstream that, I think we are still at a distance.
Yeah, certainly, because Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar, she is a specialist on gender-based budgeting, and perhaps you can stay and also pose questions to her based on your own experiences.
I think the generic and maybe later because let ma'am speak.
Yeah.
So development and disaster. I think I will go back to the generic question. Development disaster. It's very important, but maybe later. Let ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Panwar. And really, after such a enlightening and interesting discussions throughout the afternoon, I am really at a loss of words. But thank you, Simi, for the kind words, and I'm really sorry for this technical error. But first of all, I would like to thank the entire IMPRI team and the organizers for convening such an interesting holistic webinar and inviting me to be a part of this of the same. I'm sure all the sessions throughout the 3 days must have been superbly interesting, with interesting inputs from the luminary speakers. Just the two of the discussions that I was part of, I have richly learned a lot of things, and I'm sure I will be able to have many takeaways from it. It will, without much further ado, I would just come to the topic in hand. And I'm sure by now all the participants are well aware of the symbiotic relationship between these three concepts, its interdependence and the complementary nature of achieving the egalitarian social development. So Arjun, if you can go to the second slide. So basically my outline of the presentation will be on these aspects. I will be, first of all, taking you through the understanding of all these three, or generally summing up of all these three concepts, the relevance of policy making and gender budgeting as a tool. And I understand throughout the presentations, there have been many strategies discussed. And when Mr. Sanjay, Dr. Sanjay was sharing his presentation, the community-based, the PRI techniques that he was talking about, those are very, very relevant. And those are the actually the informations that help us in policy making and in developing all these gender tools, or making a gender responsive financing and planning discussion. So coming to Arjun, next slide, please. So as we are on the last day, so again, I just think that quickly to summarize them briefly, we now know gender equality is the state in which access to rights or opportunities is unaffected by gender. Here we need to keep in mind gender is understood not as a binary identity of sexes, but it encompasses every form of gender identity. The state of equal access to resources and opportunities for all, including the economic participation and the decision making, is very, very crucial and very vital. It is a matter of equitable distribution of power, influence, and resources in societies. Secondly, the climate change that we talk about is a long-term change in the average weather patterns that have come to define Earth's local, regional, and global climates. These changes have a broad range of observed effects. In other words, climate change includes both global warming driven by human-induced emissions of greenhouse gases and the resulting large-scale shifts in weather patterns. In this context, it is important to ensure equal space and resources for women and men to participate in the climate change discussion making, and action at all levels is ensured. And climate financing should be accessible to both men and women and designed to generate mutual benefits, not exacerbate the patterns of inequity. Therefore, the SDGs are a collection of these 17 interlinked global goals designed to be blueprints to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. Next slide, please, Arjun. Yeah. So, therefore, when we are talking about all these three elements, we also have to understand that it is all driven by a social, by a concept of social policy. And what is social policy? It is basically the modern government where it is based on a social contract between the citizens and the state, in which rights and duties are agreed by all to further the common interest. Citizens lend their support to a government through taxes and efforts to a country's good. In return, governments acquire the legitimacy by protecting the people's rights and through public policies that benefit all. Social policy, therefore, is an instrument applied by the government to regulate and supplement market institutions and social structures. Social policy is therefore, again, a social service such as ensures social services such as education, health, employment, and social security. However, social policy is also about the redistribution, protection, and social justice element of the discourse. So, and that's why bringing people into the center of policy making, not by providing residual welfare, but by mainstreaming their needs and voices across sectors, generating stability and social cohesion is all important and very, very critical. Arjun, next slide. So, so now coming to the three concepts. The 2030 Agenda for Social Development, adopted by all the 193 United Nations member states in the 70th UN General Assembly in 2015, commits to leaving no one behind. Globally, women, girls, and diverse genders are disproportionately vulnerable to fully enjoying all economic, social, cultural, civil, and political rights. The normative convention on elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, which was held in 1979, and again the Beijing Platform for Action in 1995, form the bedrock for ensuring that governments recognize and work towards fulfilling the rights of women, girls, and diverse genders. A precursor of the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, the third International Financing for Development Conference that was held in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia in July 15, 2015, committed to ensuring gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment, promoting peaceful and inclusive societies, and advancing fully equitable global economic systems in which no country or person is left behind. Also enabling a decent work and productive livelihood for all, while preserving the planet for all the children and future generations, were the commitments. So therefore, when we are talking, when I come down to the background of why GRB is all important, we understand that these are the precursors on which the conversation around gender budgeting is framed on. And these budgetary allocations and their outcomes have differential impacts on men, women, and diverse genders. One of the very important areas of macroeconomic and an entry point, which has gained widespread acceptance worldwide, actually, in incorporating a gender perspective in planning, budgeting, and auditing, which in short is called GRB. There is now an express realization that GRB is a powerful tool to ensure that government planning, budgeting, implementation, and auditing does not bypass women and girls who are among the most marginalized across all spheres of social economic development due to the gender inequalities that they experience in their lifetime. Therefore, GRB is a methodology that strives to integrate a gender perspective into government budgets and budgetary policies. It has been recognized as an effective policy instrument to attain gender equality outcomes. It involves engaging a variety of tools, the selection of which is subject to variables such as scope, actors, and objectives. More than 90 countries have engaged in GRB worldwide, of which 29 are in the Asia Pacific alone. And Australia pioneered the idea of GRB in the mid 80s. And since then, the GRB landscape has been evolving in a rich and dynamic way. And within that above context, GRB has been accepted globally as a critical tool for mainstreaming gender in government planning and budgeting mechanisms, with the ultimate goal of shaping the overall fiscal policy to reduce gender disparity. When we talk about India, India is also one of the very early countries to adopt this discourse. Although the government recognized GRB as a critical tool in the early 90s, in 2005-06, the government institutionalized the GRB when the Ministry of Finance directed line departments to set up gender budgeting cells and develop gender budget statements to monitor percentage budget allocations to on gender equality and women empowerment elements. Arjun, next slide, please. So this is one of the pictures which will give you an idea on why there is a gap between the realities of the ground and policy making, because one of the core elements of this conversation is the research that is done behind and the data collected during the planning phase and the baselines that we gather on this information. And as the picture will very clearly depict, the researcher, a male person, no biases here, but it's just the picture is depicting it, and it is a very old depiction from one of the journals that was on agroforestry, and where the researcher, a male person, is asking, how do you make a living here? Do women work? So the women who are in a rural setting are saying, no, we don't work, we just stay at home. Then they continue to say that, and fetch the water, find the firework, and look after the cattle. Then another woman pitches in to say that, and prepare the garden and plant the seeds. Then the other one also remembers and says, okay, and also do the weeding, then harvest the crops and sell them in the market. This gives another impetus to the others, saying that, Okay, and we also buy the food at the market, cook meals, and do the household chores. Attend the women's group meetings for all these community tasks, communal tasks, and like managing different aspects like school buildings and everything, and washing and mending the clothes for the children we bear and raise them. That's all. So then they say, so we don't work. And the interpretation of the researcher is, okay, so just I just wanted to check. So the sensitivity of a researcher or a fact finder is so very critical in these conversations around, in fact, more so in gender, but around any social issues. And that's why this image is all the more important and critical to understand. I will emphasize on it through the other picture also. Arjun, could you share that one also? This is a recent one actually, where we see that when we look into the economic parameter of it, we see that we always say that men is the breadwinner. What does the women do? She carries all the load of all the other things. So she is prone to low literacy rate. She is prone to lower wages. She is prone to unpaid care work, high mortality rates, and also additionally the gender-based violence that she faces through her lifetime. So these are the aspects, these are the nuances that gender experts needs to keep in mind when we are working on a gender responsive and gender equitable planning and designing. So on the basis of that, we now come to what exactly is gender GRB. Arjun, next slide. Yeah, thank you. So what is GRB? It is actually not a separate budget for women. It is not about spending the same on women and men. It is not about assessing programs targeted specifically at women and girls. And not it is not just about, as we say, the publishing of the gender budget statement. Not only increasing the allocations of women announced new schemes and programs, the responsibility of the women's machinery overall is aspect that we need to discuss here. And therefore, it is actually the analysis, it is actually the diverse efforts aimed at making government's planning, budgeting, auditing contribute to a gender equality lenses, and it analyzes the differential impact of policies and budget on women and men, as well as on the other axis of the social discrimination. So next slide, Arjun. So on the basis of this, when we we can understand why GRB is so critical, because the government budget is the most critical source of enabling these resources. Budget is not just an annual statement of receipt and expenditure. It is a process which enables these enables the prioritization according to the requirement of the findings from these discourses. Next, Arjun. Yeah, so therefore the goal of GRB is not just to estimate the financial requirements, but it is actually a process of analyzing the needs, planning the financial planning and understanding the financial estimations, prioritization of the allocations, resource allocation per se also is a very, very critical aspect, ensuring appropriate spending, monitoring and assessment of achievements of desired outcome is I cannot stress it enough that how important that part is, because once you have implemented it, and if you do not have a good monitoring and assessment tool, then the entire discussion actually falls flat. So that is a very, very important part. So next slide, please. So in crux, it is to ensure economic efficiency, transparency, and accountability, and also to, for the advancement of women's rights and gender equality. Next, Arjun. So this is actually, though the picture gives you a very complex idea, but this is how actually a GRB budgeting, appraisal, and auditing and the entire discussion happens. And there are many steps to it. Due to brevity of time, obviously I will not be able to discuss all steps of it, but this is more or less the process through which we go, where we the policy formulation is done, the statement are discussed, the budget compilation, budget presentation basically, and then in that presentation we explain the expenditures of each activity and the revenue collections, and therefore and ultimately the outcome of it. So in that portion we have the auditing element of it. Next slide, Arjun. So broadly, gender GRB is a range of tools that have been proposed to carry out GRB analysis, and it does not have provide a single blueprint that fits every context. The challenge of choosing the appropriate tool to meet the requirement of a given context and people involved is very, very critical, and that's where the understanding of the experts and the conversation that we have with different stakeholders comes into picture. And it is very, very critical that we understand that without a collaborative and a partnership based discussion, GRB, an effective GRB is never designed and is never effective. Next slide, please. So broadly, there are three approaches to GRB discussion. One is the gender analysis. The other is the gender disaggregated data and indicators for budgeting, and the costing of gender equity. Next. So very briefly, gender analysis is an important first step to identifying existing gender gaps in an ongoing and planned program in a project area. The process provides actually key information and data to inform better strategies and develop programs that are responsive to the differential needs of men and women, and thus reduce that it actually enables in reducing the gender equity. The objective of this step is to assess the situation of women and men and to understand their different needs and priorities within the context of our sector. It is also to help to understand how we can address the existing inequities between men and women through various programmatic interventions. In the eye of health sector, if we see through that, gender analysis could help in understanding the health related needs of women and men, is the access to health facilities for both men and women, and also in other sectors like in livelihood or employment opportunities for men and women, and the career progression of opportunities. So that is also a very, very critical part, and that's why in this entire 5-step that we do, we bring in all the parameters of the entire analysis that we do on any policy. Say for instance, if I share from my personal current experience, we are helping one of the subnationals in understanding why a women policy is critical for a state to ensure that all rights and opportunities for women and girls is achieved, and for the other sexes also is achieved, and how it can be and how it is critical to understand and justify that, okay, this exercise and this effort is under these parameters. So gender analysis helps us in doing that. Next slide. So these are the elements that we actually have in discussion when we do any gender analysis of any policy. One of the very, very critical aspects, which I will be discussing at a later period also, is the data on sex disaggregation, because that is one information point which is most of the time lacking in most places, because because we also have to keep in mind we can only take verified data, as in say for instance, in India's case, we'll be able to take census data, because that is one of the verified overall data. There are many NFHS data and everything. We use them as supplementary, but we always have to have the census, which means we have to have the entire universe in conversation in order to understand or in order to develop a fair and good, effective gender budget plan. So assessing of the results, service delivery, budget allocation, annual work plan, and these are governmental parts where the annual budget plan and the gender budget statements are drawn by the government bodies. Rest of it is also acquired from other sources. So although primarily at this point in time, India does operate on the GRB with the state, with the government body. We are not able to, although we are able to have a conversation with other stakeholders, say for instance, the CSOs or the women groups or the panchayats and everything, because the 73rd amendment under that, they are also part of the government. So whatever information they share with their higher ups, because we understand the decentralized process where the requirement is given from the Gram Sabha to the district, and and it flows above. So in that, we also try to bring in the conversations of the other stakeholders like the CSOs and the women groups, and if there are any other vulnerable groups. So this is where we have the contribution or the collaboration with the other parties of the stakeholders. Next slide, Arjun. So the next approach is actually called gender disaggregated data and indicator for budgeting, wherein the availability of adequate and reliable gender disaggregated data is very, very vital, and that statistic actually helps us in planning and implementing any program. So as I earlier said, this information is most of the time not available. However, it actually makes developing gender project budgets and other responsive gender responsive tools more effective when we have that kind of an information. So the data and evidence generated as a result of gender assessment can be used to identify gaps, set priorities and budgets, and also to develop informed strategies that that respond better to the needs of all men and women. During these project implementation stage, actually, the gender disaggregated data are used to track progress on goals and targets. So this information is significantly important and helps in developing more effective program activities and budgets in the next financial period. So that is very, very critical. Next slide, Arjun. So the next approach is costing for gender equality and equity. So costing is the process that helps in estimating the financial cost of understanding an intervention or developing or delivering services and goods. With this information, actually, it is possible to quantify the human, infrastructure, material, and financial resources required to implement a program or to deliver services to people, and to ensure that adequate resources are allocated for it in program budgets. And costing can be used to assist in transforming strategies and plan into operational and monitorable action plans and budgets. It also helps in proposing the resources and funding required to meet project targets, including human resource, material, and infrastructure costs. So, and the final thing that it does is it guides the project or the program staff on program implementation, showing which activities are required to be prioritized, as well as setting timelines of various program interventions in order to maximize the efficiency of budget allocation. Therefore, these estimations of financial cost undertaken in these kind of interventions are critical for evidence-based planning budgeting process. So costing approaches provide valuable information on the financial resources required to achieve both better outcomes as well as the benefits for all included. And here we have to always remember that when we are talking about gender budgeting, we are not talking about a women budget. We are talking about mainstreaming the budget. So which means the overall budget will be encompassing the gender element in throughout the discussion. It will not be a separate budget. So therefore it will include the needs and rights of both men, women, girls, and boys, and any other gender any other section that is in the conversation. And it can also be used to assess the social and economic cost of inaction while when we are not addressing the gender equity aspects. So therefore there are and there are actually a couple of gender equity approaches. That is another detailed discussion. So the brevity of time, I am not getting into that. So next slide, please, Arjun. So in India, actually, the GRB is divided into, as we say, two parts. Broadly, because there are many few subnationals who have other parts also, but broadly these are the two parts on which we have the conversation, wherein in part A, all the schemes in which 100% allocation for women are specified, and the next one reflects the schemes where more than at least 30% and above of provisions are allocated for women and girls are to be specified in the part B. Currently, around 57 union ministries and departments have GBC, which is gender budget self, and over 30 ministries and departments, including, of course, the union territories, report on the GBS, which is the gender budget statement annually. States were also mandated by central ministries to adopt GRB through various directives. Earlier it was Planning Commission, now it is the Niti Aayog, and GRB is under the nodal directive of the Ministry of Women and Child, and which directs the other states to adopt and implement GRB. Several states like Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka, Kerala, they are in the forerunners in the GRB conversation in the state, but there are other states as well, like Gujarat, Rajasthan, Assam, Himachal Pradesh, Maharashtra, Jharkhand, Orissa, many other states are there who are adopting and in a very staged manner, but they are adopting it, and they have announced in their annual budgets also. Few states are working on it. They have not yet announced it, but they are working on it. So because UN Women is working with many states, many subnationals, so we know which all stages they are in. So we know that in the current program that I am associated, we are implementing in 4 states. So HP, AP, Manipur, and MP are part of this project. But we have the GRB conversation in other states also: Maharashtra, Punjab, Kerala, Tamil Nadu. These are all part of the conversations. So in the current time, however, the total overall budgetary expenditure that has been specified in the budget for GRB is 4.72%, which is very nominal. However, it is what it is. So that is the figure that is. Arjun, next slide, please. So often I'm asked, how are these two parts discussed and how do we understand it? It's a very it's a detailed discussion. However, I'm just sharing this picture with you all to understand what are the tables under which we work. So we have these heads where we specify the department and then the schemes and the programs. the budget estimates, the revised estimates, and the budget estimate for the coming year. So the department should be reporting here the entire amount of the budget allocation for those schemes and programs and institutions that are meant exclusively for women and girls or transgender people. In case of composite expenditure, the department should report only the relevant gender responsive components in this portion. Then coming to the next part, which is the part B, where less than 100 is said. We keep it open because many a times many states do. We advise many states to keep the ballpark open. So 20, 25%, 30% and above will all come into the in the part B of the conversation, wherein the same process is done. And these estimates are done through various exercises that we hold the respective departments, where we guide them on what all schemes they have, the existing schemes they have or programs they have that can be put in these two sections, and what new can be talked about. So like Mr. Panwar was talking about the toilet issue. So because it is very timely, because the current Manipur government has submitted the GBS, and fortunately we were all part of that conversation. And when we were having the conversation with the Home Department, so they were not, they had a understanding that we need to work on the gender element of it, but they were not able to understand how to go about it. So then we shared experiences from other states, and during these conversations, they themselves, the officers themselves, came out with the idea that, madam, there are many police stations. There are few women police stations as well. However, there are good quality bathrooms or toilets are not present in many of the places across this state, and you have to understand this has a very varied kind of a terrain, where mountains are there and plain areas are also there. So in the remote areas, the toilet facility is not very is not in a good condition, if at all existent. So that is one of the issues that actually hampers women from going into that going into the police station to maybe file a complaint or maybe ask for some kind of a help. So that allocation, that resource is lost to access because of the unavailability of a conducive environment for a women to be there. Because we know that when we are going into this kind of a public office, we require some time. And if somebody is coming from a remote area, that person, male or female, will have to avail other services. So bathroom or toilet is a critical aspect of daily life. So that installing those bathrooms or toilets in place in these kind of office areas is critical, and maintaining the hygiene of it is also very critical. So that was one of the outcomes of our gender discussion with the Home Department, and in the current budget plan, they have submitted a proposal for that, and we are very positive that it will definitely be approved, because that is a need of the hour. So broadly, these are the elements that actually guide us in our discussion around GRB. And to just conclude that, I would say that the economic rationale for gender budgeting is broadly the understanding that evidence, considerable evidence, has already suggested that reducing the disadvantaged status of women leads to a higher rate of economic growth and economic stability. Additionally, greater equality yields benefits that are percolate to the private sector also, or the private market. So as Mr. Panwar is also pointing out, the capitalist world that we are living in, also needs to see what is the profit element of this conversation, and that's where we pitch that this is where the profit is, because if we provide a good atmosphere, a healthy atmosphere for women in any sphere of their life to prosper, the economic growth of the overall state rises, and that is obviously an attractive proposition for any capitalist entity. And we also have to understand that government budgets are not gender neutral, because fiscal measures may be different, actually have different effects on men and women, and these fiscal policies can move society towards gender equality, and which will benefit both, in fact, all the sexes. And that is why gender budgeting analysis might have advice to offer about the levels and compositions of spending. For instance, I was listening to all these conversations on the water scarcity or the drought situation. And if we are able to understand that when we are having these conversations on gender budgeting, the exercises that we do with the respective departments or the other stakeholders, if we are able to understand that improving the water infrastructure reduces the arduous burden of the drudgery of the person who has to fetch it, as well as it actually reduces the burden of supplying the water. As Mr. Panwar is talking about how can we buy water how can, as a government, how can we ask the citizens to buy the water? So that is where the conversation has to be set in, where we understand that water should not be monetized. However, understanding that there is a need to work on the entire scarcity issue or the drought issue across the country, be it urban or rural, as even Dr. Sanjay has very rightly pointed out, that we cannot have these piecemeal plans. Like, I am not against a kitchen garden or a terrace garden, but that does not actually address the overall water scarcity issue. In fact, at some instances, we see that it actually adds to it, because the water that is pumped to those gardens are not done in a very sustainable manner. That's why it actually pulls out the water tables further, and it's actually hampering the entire conversation further. So we have to understand that overall, women continue to be in the disadvantage relationship vis-a-vis the men, and but when we see when we are able to address the aspects of education or health infrastructure, those actually build the fiscal policy in a proactive way, where we are able to gain progress and eliminate those gaps, and public spending can actually target key areas and the other key areas. So basically, gender differences in behavior have implications for macroeconomic policies, be it the consumption behavior or the risk-taking or the public choice and investment element of it, or even the broader labor market aspect of it. So all these elements can be addressed if we are able to actually have a very proactive, detailed gender transformative planning and budgeting strategy across the board with all states, with all subnationals and national settings. So that is my submission. If there are any queries, please. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, ma'am. You have really connected your presentation across all the presentations made by our previous speakers, and wonderful presentation, and lots of things to learn. Mr. Tikender, sir, if you are there, you would want to connect your thoughts with that of Dr. Dhar's, and start with a conversation if you want to for a couple of minutes.
No, I don't think I have to add.
Okay, sir. Okay. So I would like to ask a few questions to Dr. Dhar about, there are several questions, but ma'am, how the government has increased, so the question goes like this: the government has increased the budget in gender responsiveness for empowering women. Can this importance given in budget improve the mindset of women in today's time, or maybe it can lead to a positive impact? And closely related to this is gender budgeting occurring largely through the male gaze? Are policies and schemes drafted through gender responsive budgets focused on process that enhance the capacities and freedoms, or are they just making provisions within the male dominant schemes?
Thank you for these questions. Actually, to answer the first part of it, government is allocating fund to it, although very according to the need, it is quite less. However, there is a start to it, and that's what we always say, that the 21st century is for the women because of these proactive changes and improvements in the conversation. And that's why, to answer the first part of it, you said government is doing something proactive. What was the question? I forget.
Yes, is the government doing something proactive?
It has actually mandated many subnational states to adopt it, because you see the problem or the gap is also about the information. So although there are all highly qualified professionals everywhere, be it the government or the governance or any other element, any other structure of the governance setting, but to understand that how a gender budget has to be derived or worked upon needs some technical understanding about the issue. So until and unless, and it's not a piecemeal conversation. So like Dr. Sanjay was saying, that there are women who are taking up the ownership. So that conversation, say for instance, when we are having the conversation with Rajasthan subnational, the government, when they are having the conversation with the CSOs, the findings from that set helps us to design or helps us to understand what is the need, as well as to design further plans, further proactive plans. And it is not only women, as he also very rightly pointed out, that when they understand the relevance of the work that you're doing, say for instance, we know that Rajasthan is a very patriarchal state, and many issues are there, and for that matter, many other states in India are patriarchal. Very strictly patriarchic, and I was part of a very proactive selective project in that state, and it is endemic to female feticide. However, when we have had the conversation with the communities and we built those civil societies, they all joined voluntarily. There was no money element to it. कोई profit नहीं था उन लोगों को. होता ना कि मतलब हम पैसे दे रहे हैं तो आप ज्वाइन करो, वैसा कुछ नहीं था. It was all voluntary because they realized the need for it. Although there are some slogans which I do not approve of, and unfortunately I was part of those conversations where slogans like बेटी नहीं बचाओगे तो बहू कहां से पाओगे, that is very problematic for a gender expert, because we work on this notion, and which is a fundamental aspect also, that I have the right to live on the virtue of my by the virtue of my survival. It's not because I will be doing some roles at a later period, hence my my relevance is important, and that's why I need to have existence. That is a very bad and wrong notion, and that's why when we are having this kind of conversation across any platform, we have to understand the planners and the facilitators have to be very, very sensitive, because ground में जो बातें दिनचर्या में बोली जाती हैं उसमें बहुत सारी बायसेस होती हैं, लेकिन उस बायस को आप ब्रेक डाउन करके अगले को रियलाइज करवाओ दैट दिस इज व्हाई इट इज प्रॉब्लमैटिक is the skill of the facilitator. It's not I would say it is the fault of the community, because that is the understanding they come from. But when I am able to substantiate with examples and the entire conversation around the science of it, they understand that okay, ये factors हैं which we need to understand, and वो जो चीजें उसके बाद जो वो लोग प्लान करते हैं ना, that is very very proactive and that is very very participatory and effective and sustaining, because we can have many programs, we can have many schemes which will be doing very well at a time period, but if they do not sustain, the entire effort is wasted. And that's why whenever we are having any conversation around GRB also with any subnational, any state states, we always have these, we always try to bring in these insights. Say for instance, we recently had a conversation with HP where many of the Anganwadi workers shared that it's not just the child marriage, it was a conversation on the child marriage aspect of it. And they were saying that, ma'am, it's not that the husbands are, the parents are forcing them to get married. It has become such a cultural practice that even the youth, even the adolescents actually have this notion that we will elope. There are some time periods when it happens, some ritual festivals around which that happens, and they are all studying, they are all having their normal lifestyle, but they think that this is a normal practice. So this is an Anganwadi worker sharing from the ground that this is happening. I am trying to mobilize, I am trying to build the understanding on this, but they themselves are doing it. It's not the parents. The parents are actually coming and complaining कि ये लोग सारे पढ़ाई लिखाई करने के एज में शादी करने जा रहे हैं. So how do we help that? So that and if we judge, that is a wrong approach. We have to understand that this is a reality through which they live, and maybe for convenience or maybe for many other aspects they practice it. So how do you mobilize, how do you motivate, how do you inspire that section of a community to come out of it and then practice a different way of life is the skill of the facilitators. And that's where all these conversations become very critical, and that's why whenever we are having conversations on GRB, although it primarily shows a top-down approach, but we in UN Women at least, we are, or for that matter, any of the CSOs who are working on GRB conversations also practice the same, where we have multi-stakeholder conversations. So we have the community, we have the CSOs, we have the academicians. I recently finished scheduled a very interactive conversation with the CSOs and the academicians of the state in Manipur, and that is very critical because these states are very remote, although very advanced in many other ways, but remote to the mainstream discussion or the discourse. So bringing in that understanding and helping them to understand how to maneuver through it is very, very critical. And that's why gender experts, or for that matter, we the facilitators, have to be at all times very, very conscious how we are understanding the conversation. Is there a bias? Is there a salient bias in the conversation? And how do we address it? For instance, in it is said that it is run by the mothers, because Mothers Association is a very strong body. But internally, now we know that there are many, for a shortage of word, I'm just saying permutation and combinations to the conversation. There are many other sections who are in the conversation, and if we do not take all of them in the conversation, then it will become very, very problematic. And that's why it is very critical. I hope I've answered most of it. I know.
Yes, absolutely, ma'am. Absolutely. You have taken the answers, and very, very pertinent points that you have raised also in your response. So thank you very much. We are really grateful that you were able to Thank you so much. And if there are any further questions, we'll be happy to mail it to you, and then we can put it across to our participants. One question is very pressing, and that needs to be responded by Tikender sir. Sir, if you are there. Sir, this is by Abhinav. Having worked on high administrative levels yourself. So are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Having worked on high administrative levels yourself, would you be of the opinion that in the current...
Can you just come again, Simi? Can you repeat the question?
Since you have worked on high administrative levels, would you be of the opinion that in the current world order, globalization is affecting systems at micro and macro levels as greed for capital has taken over the world? Changing the world order by investing into welfare economics via sustainable growth of the planet is the need of the hour. Do you think that global political community lacks the required will and impetus needed to achieve the same? And if yes, where do we go from there?
I think the question is very interesting, and the answer also lies in the last sentence of the question.
Yes.
So I would say no, it doesn't lack, because this is, and I think I also need to draw the generic question. You see, the struggle between, it's not a struggle between man and nature. If you try to understand that form. In fact, it's a struggle of a different, as I pointed out in the beginning. So it's the aggrandizement, and the aggrandizement of natural resources, particularly by a particular system, which I call neoliberal capitalism, the last 4 decades, which actually affects us pretty badly. Now, there are experiments. Now, take for example. That's why I mentioned the new Green Deal. I mean, who would have expected, after Trump, that a new Green Deal will be discussed? Simi, can you imagine that? I mean, so we have to work out those nuances, no? I mean, presently we are in India in an era where, challenge the government invites sections of anti-national sedition and all. But maybe 2 years down, I mean, similar things were happening in the US. So, and similarly, if you see, I would say that is a kind of totalitarian argument that the UK labor politics is now advocating. Can you imagine what they're asking? They're saying companies who do not adhere to green, I mean, they've also come up with a Green Deal. We would ensure that they do not qualify in the stock market. I mean, I term it as a totalitarian regime, but these are being discussed. Just recently, I saw the entire British Railways, which was privatized, is now selectively being again brought back into the public fold. It is faltered completely. Now, just to understand the kind of nuances and the kind of ideological debate that it is going to generate. After Thatcherism came from there, now the state has no business to be in business. I mean, but there we are finding, and it's not coming. It's coming from them. They are realizing it. The huge iniquity that has creeped in. I was made to understand because when I visited London last, many of their fire stations, health stations were commoditized, privatized. Now they're again taking them back because they were given to real estate, and they are not sustaining. So I think, yes, we know. I mean, what Joseph Stiglitz kept on reminding us that. I mean, he was one of the ardent philosophers. No, at one point of time with the IMF. I mean, he was the chief of IMF. At one point of time, he said, "No, what a disaster we've done." So, but what would be the alternative? I mean, one of the alternatives I was seeing Keynesian economies. Yes, that could be one, but I think they will be multi-layered. And in this multi-layered, I am a strong supporter and ardent advocate of decentralization and democratization of all these processes. Because we will still live in capitalism, we will still be generating surplus, we will still be exporting. But my intervention, and if you ask me, it would be how do I democratize it? Now I'll just give you one small anecdotal example, and I think that would suffice. We know we are going to go for the Internet of Things, and there's massive flow of capital that's going to come up. Now it sounds good. I mean, Simi, you take your mobile, you press the button, you switch off your light at home, you press the button, you switch off your water, you press all that stuff. And who would not like that to happen? But there's a huge capital cost added to that. And this is what the Barcelonians did. I mean, when they said, let's win Barcelona. I mean, the two communists who won in Barcelona, the mayor and the deputy mayor, you know what they did? They said the entire smart city will be indigenous, in the sense the entire process of planning and the entire process of execution. We have our own expertise. We have our own technical know-how. We will be actually building our smart city layer, the basic infrastructure on which the smart city is developed. So that means they said we will democratize it. We will democratize the surplus that gets generated through the process of smart cities. Fair enough, fine. Here, what is happening, and that's why I said I'll share an anecdotal experience. When we were in the town, I do not want to name because that doesn't sound prudent, but one of the largest, service providers, they said, hey, we want to dig the city and we want to lay our fiber. And that fiber is meant to provide, the layers of smart city network on top of that. We said, no, we won't allow you. He said, but this doesn't happen in India. I mean, we are paying you the price. No, I mean, we are digging you. There's a price that they have to pay. The right of way is out. We said, no, because we also knew that there's a smart city coming up. We asked them to lay 2 ducts free of cost to the city. Now, what does that mean? And they were like, they were completely pissed. They said, no, we won't do that. Because 1 duct they will lay for themselves, and 2 ducts they will keep empty, and that's how they will earn their business, All the layers, your smart metering, everything is going to happen through that. We said, no, we are a stakeholder. Right of way is mine. We don't. 6 months they went to the chief minister. The chief minister said, hey, they don't listen, Baba. You just go back to them. Right of way is theirs, and they are directly elected, so we can't remove them. There was no right to recall. So you better accept what they are asking. So we took the money. The city government took the money. I mean, whatever public works cost, but also we took those 2 ducts. So nowhere in the country except in a city like Shimla, there are 2 ducts lying completely empty. Now, if a city government wants to go into a partnership instead of being a subservient, now that's a different, being a subservient to the smart city and being a partner to the smart city. So the city government can be a partner to the smart city and can actually lay hands to the fruits that will germinate out of this entire smart city and give it back to its people. Now, all those nuances have worked out. Maybe every city doesn't have the capacity. I mean, Kerala is doing its laying the entire fiber itself, fine. But what about other states? I think so. So, I mean, what interventions? I think, to me, if we are not able to change the system now, probably it will change tomorrow. But now, I think our struggle has to focus on democratizing the surplus. And I think this Kisan struggle that is taking place at the borders at Delhi is one of the ways, one of the forms, and one of the manifestations into reclaiming their spaces. They are also realizing. I think with that I would end. That would be more than enough. So yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That intervention was very important. Democratizing the surplus and reclaiming the space. Yes, definitely, it is very important. And so, thank you so much. And we are now happily moving towards the closing session. And we have with us Professor Anil Gupta, Head ECDRM, to provide his concluding remarks, and then we'll make a few announcements about the certificates and the feedback links. So another 10 minutes. So Professor Gupta, over to you.
Very good afternoon. I was listening to my dear friend, Mr. Tikender ji, and also Dr. Sanghamitra. And in fact, I agree to the points that they were raising. Very important issues are existing, but only thing that how we have a better planned and more acceptable way. Because yes, sometimes it happens that the left is also right and right is also right. And how to bring left and right both on the common table and make them work together. And sometimes in this effort, it takes quite a long time, and then it happens that we reach to a level where the things are irreparable. So I think that should not happen. And that is why these kind of capacity building interventions, these kind of discourses are very important. Because people, to make people in authority, to make people in policy table, to accept these issues is very important. And for this, actually, coming up with some kind of data sets, coming up with some kind of fact sheets is very important. Otherwise, see, the personal opinion and personal thoughts have no limits. But when we come with some kind of solid information, then our arguments become more strong. And then we should anticipate that it should change the mindset of the people sitting in the authority, and then can consider this. Climate change issue, which has for quite a long time been a subject of science for quite a long, and still there is a fraternity which believes mostly on the scientific predictions. They, from physics and other backgrounds, they do space technology and all. But how to address this challenge, that is important. For example, recently we had 2 major cyclones. Yes, the tracking of cyclone is a scientific methodology, but addressing the risk on the ground requires a lot of governance issues, lot of issues dealing with communities, lot of social issues, lot of economic issues also. And that is the reason in the climate risk management also, the aspects related with social dimensions are very important. And within society, then talking about the equity and equality, both are important, because society, we cannot create sections in society only horizontally, but there are vertical, horizontal, and so many even diagonal. Like we have the different vulnerability of children, we have different vulnerability of women, then different vulnerability of the girl child. Similarly, different vulnerability of the aged people, ailing, and different vulnerability of the women at workplace. So there are different kind of vulnerabilities, even if we consider women as a specific section. So we'll have to look at subsections also. And this program of 3 days, I think very important points have been brought out by learned speakers in this program. And the objective of this program was basically to bring the gender justice concerns into the mainstream planning, because now we had National Action Plan on Climate Change, and then we have the State Action Plan on Climate Change, and now currently we are discussing that we should have a district level environmental action plan also, and we should take this State Action Plan on Climate Change also to the district level. So how would we need to address these things? Otherwise, what will happen, we'll come up with some plan without taking care of these things, and then it will not be having that value. So that is important, because our 73rd and 74th amendment also says that all the planning at local level has to be participatory, and we have to emphasis more and more local capacity building in these aspects. So I think very important discussions was there. And this also has to be taken care that when we are talking about the gender justice or women empowerment, we have to see the strengths also, strength of the women, not only them as a vulnerable section of society. Yes, vulnerabilities are important, and the vulnerabilities need to be understood, but their strengths also, that is very important, because when we start looking the same thing from a positive point of view, and when we start looking at promoting women leadership in climate risk management and disaster risk management, I think that can be one option to promote gender justice or to promote the women equality. So that is also important, and we need to have more and more integrated approach for addressing this. This is the kind of a nutshell of the entire discourse of this 3-day. But we should also be to make sure that all the sections of society should respect each other. That is also important. It should not be vice versa, that then we create a different kind of skewness in the society, and then we have to have different missions to address those kind of issues also. Because when we talk of the mental health people, mental health experts, they say that all the sections of society, whether they are male population, they are female population, they are children, they are girl child, are aged, all have differential psychosocial issues. Some have the opportunities are the process of venting out. Some they do not have the process of venting out, and sometimes when some people they do not have an opportunity to vent out their stresses, they went out in a wrong ways. So I think the training on these things should also be include that how to safely vent out. Like within the industrial systems, when we talk, we say fail safe procedures are safe shutdown. So that is our emergency shutdown procedure. So similarly here also, how to safely vent out. So for example, if a person, a male member of the family loses his livelihood or has some kind of a stress outside the home, he should not went out in a way by beating his spouse or family member or child, but we should train the society in a way to provide safer vent out also, and that should also be incorporated in a strategy. And how all the sections of society understand the stress level of the counterparts also. Like when we talk of the wages or when we talk of the working women, we often discuss that the household, the women doing household work, we seldom consider that as working women. So now this is very important discourse going on in the entire country and outside also, that that work should be recognized. So I think these are very important dimensions which are emerging, and I must compliment the entire team of IMPRI, Dr. Simi, Dr. Arjun, and from my team, Dr. Fatima, and all the resource persons who have made this program a success. And thanks to all the participants, a large number of participants, and this shows the interest of the people in this subject. And this series that we have started with IMPRI, I think very shortly we are going to announce another program also, and I will look forward that all these participants and some more participants would also join, because next time we will be having more the capacity to accommodate even more number of participants in such programs. So with this, my best compliments and best wishes, and thanks to one and all for this program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Gupta, for brilliantly summarizing and encapsulating the 3-day program, and for your motivations at the end of your lecture. Now, sir, thank you. Your presence and your support really means a lot to all of us. So I would now invite our colleague from NIDM, Ms. Fatima, to just inform the participants about the feedback link and the certificate. Fatima ji, over to you.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon all. I am Ms. Fatima. I am a young professional at National Institute of Disaster Management. So yeah, the procedure to get e-certificates is like you have already registered for the said program. Just a moment. So what you have to do, so you just, only the participants who have registered through the NIDM training portal will be eligible for e-certificates. So for e-certificates, participants need to have 60% for webinars, since it's a training. So participants need to have 80% attendance for online training course. So to get your e-certificates, kindly check the NIDM training portal. After one or two to download your e-certificate, since it requires a certain amount of hours to generate attendance list, Simi ma'am will be sharing me the list of attendance. So I'll upload it on the portal, and you have to give a feedback form. After completion of training program, all the participants have to share their feedback on the login page of NIDM through portal. Training.nidm.gov in the enrolled courses. So you just have to wait for 1 day or two. Simi ma'am will be sending with the attendance. I'll upload the attendance, and you will submit the your feedback form. After that, you will get your attendance e-certificate. I think that's all we need for the certificates.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Fatima ji. And in case you have you face any issues in the next 2 days,
sorry,
within the 2 days, yes. Please write to us at learning@impri@gmail.com, the usual email ID which is there on the posters and everywhere. So don't worry about receiving the certificates. So thank you. And now I would like to just move on to the vote of thanks. And formally, I would like to conclude the session we have tried our best to have this training program as engaging as possible and as diverse as possible by having experts not just from the academia but also from grassroots level workers, NGOs, INGOs, international non-governmental organizations, UN agencies, and also policy practitioners. So overall, it has been a very diverse learning experience for all of us, and I hope you gained from it. And the overall overall aim of this exercise was to apprise all of you, the participants, of the issue which directly and indirectly really affects us all, whether it is gender equality, climate change, sustainable development goals, or a nexus of all the three. So maybe this would have been helpful to generate interest in terms of your future career options, or as a profession or higher education and research. So we'll take note of all your feedback, and we promise to bring you another session on a similar theme. And I wish you all a very safe days ahead, and please stay healthy, and God bless you all. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Gupta, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Simi.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.